think we're gonna go ahead and get started. What do I do?
No, it's expensive. I mean, I'm charging $600.
I think it'll go away.
Okay.
Either at the bottom.
Everything is, okay.
175.
I'm gonna put this down before I.
Says in
Yeah.
10 seconds, you're gonna consent automatically to something.
That's okay. Okay, welcome everyone to day 2 of the State Trails Advisory Committee meeting. Thank you so much for all your time and dedication yesterday. It was a very long day. I am so impressed with how many we did yesterday. Today we are focusing in on the recreational trails program and those applications. At the end of the RTP app review, I think if there's some time left, Hunter wanted to come back in to chat a little bit more about TSB and some of those hanging questions from yesterday. So we'll get back to that at the end. Hopefully there'll be time. I think what we'll do first is go ahead and do quick introductions. We'll start in the room and then go online. This is just for the record and if anyone new is joining us online today. So I'll start with Bob.
Bob, you're up. Oh, jeez, I'm not awake yet. Bob Walker, I'm with Montana Trails Coalition out of Clancy, Montana.
Jason Howell, West Yellowstone.
Tom Anderson, Kalispell.
Mike Patterson, Butte.
Marlena Lanini, Billings.
Philip Lipke, Bozeman.
Brooke Lincoln Hagen.
Great, thank you. And then we have in the back.
My name is Brad Cullen. I'm BLM's Travel, Transportation, and Trails Program Lead for Montana and both of the Dakotas. And I sit in Butte.
Thank you. Then going online, we'll go to Adam.
Yeah, hi, good morning. My name is Adam Brooks. I'm the Bureau Chief for the Financial Assistance and Compliance Bureau here at Fish, Wildlife and Parks in Helena. My office manages all the federal funding for the agency, and I'm very fortunate to have Stephanie Clement managing our recreation trails program here. So nice to meet you all.
Thank you. Let's go to Ginny.
Jenny Sullivan, representing Missoula and Helena, as I live in one place and work in the other.
Thank you. Julie. Oh, Julie, you're muted.
Julie Riley from Valberg, Montana.
Thank you. Katie.
Good morning, folks. Katie Potts. I am the new Rec Trails point of contact for the Federal Highway Administration Montana Division. So I've taken over this program from Jeff Patton, who retired just a few weeks ago. So I've been working with Stephanie pretty closely the last couple of weeks, and it's great to meet you all, and I'm happy to be here.
Thank you, Katie. Lori. We'll move on to Leela.
Sorry, trying to get myself unmuted here. And I get my picture up in a minute too. Lelia Mellon with the National Park Service Rivers, Trails, and Conservation Assistance Program. I am based in Bozeman, Montana. Happy to be here.
Thank you. And then Chris, are you here for public comment or are you one of the advisors?
Public comment.
Public comment. Okay, great. For those here for public comment, we have that on the agenda for 8:45. So we'll be sure to take a moment then for that. Great. Okay. So moving along here. I'm going to share my screen. I don't have too many slides here to share. I just want to kind of check in, make sure we're all on the same page as far as timeline and whatnot. Hopefully I know this was a little laggy when we shared the screen last time.
I'm still a little laggy too. So.
I can kind of feel the vibe in the room. We're all just a little one step behind this morning. That's okay. So recreational trails program, again, it's been a lot around for quite some time. This one is federally funded through the Highway Trust Fund, or yeah, Highway Trust Fund. Very similar to RTP as far as how it acts. TSP was kind of modeled after RTP. You know, maybe a little bit more stringent on some of the guidelines and whatnot, just because that's in more hardlined code or guidelines from federal highways. We also operate in the 30-40-30 with a 5% being able to be used for education funds. It's a very small pot of funding and it's kind of a bucket within a bucket. Education projects are also deemed non-motorized, motorized, or diversified. We'll get into that a little bit when we see those education projects, but just some context for when we go into the applications here. Application cycle, we kind of already went through this. Just a quick recap on where we are. There were 38 eligible applications. There was one application that was deemed ineligible. It's because it was for vehicle access road improvements and for campground improvements, which we do not fund either of those things. So it was unfortunate. I'm sure a really good project. It's just not something that we fund.
Was that a BLM one?
It was.
Was that Acton or Billings?
I think so. Yeah.
And we had another one that I see is not on the list. Vermont City of Street Construction.
Not for RTP.
Had the application.
Oh, I made, unless it didn't get submitted.
Okay.
CBD. Whoops. So 38 applications, roughly 2.3 million in requests. Of those, we have 6 motorized projects, about 466,000, 15 diversified applications, 18 non-motorized applications. And that small education, again, bucket within a bucket, of those 15 diversified projects, 55 of them were sort of education or had an education component to them. Again, we'll kind of get into that a little bit. But new trail development, about 7 applications, trail maintenance and rehab, 16, trail maintenance for grooming, 10, those education awareness, and that's like core, the whole project was education awareness was 3. And then then there was 2 specifically signage type projects, which I thought was interesting and different. I don't feel like we usually get projects that are solely for signage. So that's why I called it out specifically here. Usually that's not called out, but I thought it was interesting. Any questions on this?
Stephanie, did you mention, is it 1.5 million?
Yep, so that's in the next. So
Okay.
Originally, at our last meeting, I had mentioned that we only had about 1.2 in FWP authority. We had like an authority shortage. And for a while, that's what we were going with up through internal reviewing. We were planning with that 1.2 in place. But after some conversations with Adam and Adam being able to talk with some folks, we were able to be approved to use future authority for the next fiscal year. Because we don't sign contracts until July 1, and that's when our new fiscal year starts. That's how it was told to me. So in other words, we're able to use our full allotted federal highways funding now, which is really nice. That put almost another $300,000 in the pocket for these folks. Which truly, when I was first going through and trying to like propose funding for folks, it got really hard, and having that extra bit of cash, it made it still hard, but
Yeah.
slightly less hard.
So the motorized, when I was looking at the number there, they're just about at 30% then, aren't they?
They are for this cycle. This is probably one of the first times in a while that we've been able to get enough, or motorized applications to meet that 30% for motorized, which is fantastic, and I'm super happy to see that. Overall, we're still behind because the way the RTP funds and that allocation works, it's kind of cumulative, like over time. So we're still kind of behind based on the last few years.
Sure.
So I think there's still some catch up to make sure that we're staying within that 30-40-30 rule, but still really good to see that we'll be able to meet the minimum.
And equipment purchases allowed through RTP, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay.
Equipment purchases are allowed for our TP. We have a lot fewer equipment purchases this year compared to last year. I think because last year is when they were able to, we had the BABA waiver, so that really helped out.
Yeah.
Any questions before I open up our applications?
Is the BABA waiver still applied to this cycle?
There's a, I always forget all of the terminology, but essentially like a small grants waiver.
Okay.
And RTP falls under that, and I believe there's no reason to think it doesn't. Katie's raising her hand, so maybe I should let her talk, because she seems like she would know.
Stephanie.
Yeah.
Thanks, Stephanie. That's a de minimis waiver, and it's for purchases under $500,000. And it does, after reviewing most of the contracts that are out there right now for RTP, it appears that a majority of that equipment that is purchased through Rec Trails would qualify. And the
Perfect.
notice of the waiver is the waiver itself, so there's not a whole lot of paperwork to do.
Perfect. Thank you, Katie, for
Yeah, of course.
putting that in a nice little package for me.
Thanks.
Yes.
Did I miss something there? What'd she say? Was there a maximum amount?
Yeah,
Pay
for anything under 500,000.
So a $300,000 or $400,000 groomer would still be available.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Okay.
Of course, it's $80,000.
That's
It's not that anymore. I think it's even more. I mean, the price of everything's gone up. So crazy.
So what I either gave out to you today or I emailed earlier a few weeks ago was a comment sheet with all of the projects listed, a short description, and I believe a funding amount request. So that's just a comment sheet. I would really love to collect those if you make comments here today, or if you made comments over time in your own time reviewing these applications. I do compile those comments for our final determinations meeting, which usually happens after this. The internal committee will come back together, review the comments provided by the staff, and then might make our final determinations. So if you have comments on those sheets, would really love to collect them today. For those online, for our committee members online, again, you should have already access to that. Otherwise, Hunter, I think, just sent it out to you. Yep. So again, feel free to email that to me so that I can collect your comments and compile that all together. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna kind of share my screen with my spreadsheet that will have the scores and our proposed draft funding allocations, and we'll kind of, very similar to what we did with TSP yesterday, just a slightly different formatting. Just a second while I pull that up. We wait for the lag.
It's where you can see it right away over here.
I know.
There we go.
I'm gonna have to zoom in. Can folks in the room see that okay-ish?
Yeah.
Okay. So just
Just be truthful. Come on.
So just generally speaking, how I have this set up, here's the applicants, of course. I have their their requested funds here. Education funds are pulled out. I'll explain that in a little bit. This is the total score or average out score from the internal committee. And the color coding, a little arbitrary, but just trying to split high, medium, low, just so it's a little visual. The internal committee suggested level of funding. This is kind of what came out of conversations. And then I have notes over here from just general comments from the internal committee meeting. And then this is my draft suggested funding amount, which you'll also be able to see and kind of review here today. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna actually filter these so that we're only looking at one category at a time. So first we're gonna look at just the motorized projects against all the motorized projects, and then diversified non-motorized. Does that make very
Yeah.
much sense?
Yep.
So we'll start with motorized since that's the smallest bucket, or I shouldn't say bucket, number of applications. We have the Missoula Snowgoers Snowmobile Association. They ranked at the top of this category, $18,000 for their grooming operations. Pretty fair request for the amount of work they do. Motorized, full fund. Good.
Yeah, good.
Flathead Snowmobile Association, similar, had a good application. They groom quite a large area, motorized, suggested full funding.
Good.
Good.
Okay. These are so hard, I know.
Yeah, yeah.
West Yellowstone Chamber of Commerce, 94,000, suggested full fund. We all know those trails out over yonder.
That's a lot of money though to go to West Yellowstone.
Yeah, it
is.
As long as it's not roads. we're good.
Let's see, Great Falls Trail Bike Riders Association, which we can somewhat, I know there's a larger conversation about the Great Falls Trail Bike Riders and Montana Trail Vehicle Riders, and then there are two TSP applications. I don't want to lump them all together, but I know that the conversation is kind of within all of them. So we have a full fund for both of these applications. One of them included, I think it was the Great Falls Trail Bike Riders. I can't remember off the top of my head, but one of them included some equipment purchases for the folks to get out on the trail. It was that one?
Yep.
Yeah. So I think that was maybe between $20,000 and $30,000 worth of the request was for that equipment. Before their volunteers would use their own sort of dirt bikes and whatnot to get out and clear trail. They're just asking that the organization have access to its own equipment. So, thoughts, comments, questions?
The only thing was the BABA for it, but it sounds like it's under the 500, so.
Yep, it should all be cleared via that. Yeah, and again, like Hunter was saying, I had sat down with Seth as well, and we talked about like the different things that these organizations do, even though there's kind of a one person helping to manage all of them. And he had a lot of high confidence in their ability to keep it all straight and figured out administratively. We have funded both these organizations in the past, and truly the money is in and out pretty quick, it seems. I've never had a problem administratively, at least, between that funding.
They set a good example for what everybody ought to be, should be doing, I think, you know.
Yeah. And then the next one, our last one here is the Kings Hill Grooming Association. This is a fairly standard request coming from them. for their grooming operations. There was one question on their application in the budget table. I think there was some miscellaneous purchases that was under RTP request, but in their narrative, they had it under match. So there is a potential, after clarification, that this might get knocked down by 5,200 because I can't tell if it was part of their request or part of their match, and I need to clarify that. I meant to do it before this meeting and then it just escaped me. So either full fund or minus 52. Comments, questions? Happy. That was easy.
And so that total for the motorized then would be what?
Right now, it's shown here, it's a little small.
466, 100.
Oh, there, okay.
And that's, you have even the percentage there, 31%. then.
Yep. Right there in the pocket. You'll notice here that this is negative, and I realize that we'll get to later. It will be fixed, just not yet. The next one I think we'll do, because it's also a small bucket, is we're gonna look at just our projects that have sort of the education funds in them. So some of these projects are larger projects that aren't all education related, but there's a good chunk of the project that had education like funding in it. We have, just as an overview, we have, I'm missing one in here. Oh, there it is. We have 2 avalanche centers. The avalanche centers do a lot of the forecasting, putting out awareness information, data collection, et cetera, et cetera. So that is considered an education project, and they're diversified projects. They both requested $45,000 for their time spent doing those. The Bridger Ski Foundation, there was a section of their project that was for contracted services for outside kind and other kind of these education awareness type components of their application. So that was about $4,500 of that total cost. And then Friends of the Little Belts, half of the application was for like trail maintenance and whatnot, and the other half was for map printing, updating some maps, putting in some education awareness type information in those like maps and whatnot, and getting materials printed. So that's why it's a little bit both these big categories and a little bit of these education funds. But we only have $80,000 in education funds to give out, which is just such a tight space of funding. And just the way we looked at the scoring, the types of projects, priorities, what else would get funded for some of these organizations, what we proposed, because it's kind of hard to tell in this, the way I have it set up here. But what we proposed was splitting the $80,000 between the 2 avalanche centers for their time. There is another Friends of the Gallatin Forest Avalanche Center. That was specifically for equipment for the avalanche centers, snowmobiles to get out there. The only issue with that is because the pocket of funding is so small for this category, it kind of felt like pitting time for the folks versus equipment for the folks. So we just prioritize the time, the staff time. So more than happy to open this up to discussion if there's some different thoughts on that process. Again, it's always been a kind of a difficult category because the percentage is so small. I'm really hoping that TSP in the future will be able to find some education type projects so we can, because I know there's other folks who want to utilize that funding. It's just that our pocket is so small for it. So this one's hard to kind of go line by line I kind of talked about it as a whole, but we can definitely pull things out if folks have questions.
Yeah, Senate Bill 310 passes the House.
Oh, it did.
And I say if it
Oh,
does,
yeah.
it's already passed the Senate. That includes safety education. So that allow more money for this. And I'm glad to see the West Central Montana Avalanche Foundation is getting money because they're the most hurting unit in the avalanche program. So that I'm glad to see they were on number one.
Highly publicized that they're hurting.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
big time. That one especially always has.
Definitely. And like with the Bridger, and I know they have some like good stuff going on with their education type programs. But as you can see, we are planning on funding a good bit of their other pieces of the puzzle. So that's kind of where we've been, yeah. And the Friends of the Little Belts, I like the idea of what they were thinking of for like the new printing of maps and some awareness type projects. We were all in agreement with it. The application itself fell a little short for us. And just based on scoring and whatnot is also why we decided to forego their education component.
So on your spreadsheet that you're showing there, the draft suggested funding amount is the total amount of the eligible funds requested, but the eligible funds requested are not all education funds.
Right.
They were all the funds, and so you.
Of this 145,000 was education component. And so we're saying we would not be funding that 45.
Right.
Yeah, I totally recognize that this is a funky way because buckets within buckets, it's a little weird category.
So the Friends of the Little Belts applied for 100,000, 45,000 of it was gonna be for the education. That left 65,000, but they're funding 38,000 of that 65,000. Is what your
Yes,
recommendation is.
yep, and we'll
Just
get
making sure
into
I'm
that
reading
when
it
we
right.
open up the diversified project as a
Okay.
whole. Yeah,
Okay, all right,
Yeah.
I'm just trying to make sure I understand how it's put.
Yeah. yeah,
Getting the numbers right.
it's very funky.
Well, I'm just trying, yeah.
No, definitely. But otherwise, just looking at the education dollars, are we feeling comfortable with that approach?
Yeah, looks good.
Cool.
And so we have 80,000 to divvy out and we're divvying out, was it 40 and 40?
Yeah,
And
it'd be this one and this one.
yeah, just the two avalanche centers make up the 80. Okay.
And why does the West Central struggle so much? That's Missoula, right, basically?
Part of it, I believe, is because they are an actual nonprofit as opposed to being attached to the Forest Service like the other avalanche centers are.
Okay.
That's my understanding.
Yeah, so there are no federal dollars
Yeah.
except for this going into their program. It's always been a hurting unit over there.
We're gonna go to diversified now. So how I divided up or selected my diversified projects within our TP, if you allow e-bikes on your trail, which is a question in the application, if you allow them on the trail, you're automatically diversified. You cannot be a non-motorized. So anything in here, there might be some that are like, wouldn't that be non-motorized? But because I allow e-bikes, it automatically makes them diversified. Or they are like what I sometimes say, like truly diversified. They have non-motorized and motorized pieces of the puzzle. So that's what I have pulled up here. RTP gets a little funky on the back end where you technically could take a non-motorized project that has hiking and biking and call it diversified. But I try to avoid that unless we have to fill the buckets and we're not meeting the requirement. This cycle, it feels like we can meet the requirement, keeping it what I consider like more of a truly diversified projects.
Back up to the e-bike thing or whatever, that's something that's documented, that the e-bikes are motorized now, or?
That's kind of at the federal level. I could have Katie, do you have anything to chime in on that?
I don't, but that is something I can look into if we want some follow-up information.
Yeah, we've
It's
had,
new, I'm just trying to.
no, you're totally fair. Throughout my time with RTP, it's always been a conversation, right? With all the state admins, and we have like a biannual training, and at our last training, it was our head federal guy from DC was like, if you have an e-bike on the trail, it's a diversified project.
They're not calling it motorized, they're calling it diversified, or.
Unless you have a trail that is solely for e-bikes and nothing else, it's kind of hard to call it motorized, you know what I mean?
Because like the National Park Service, they allow e-bikes, but what about BLM?
So BLM, they are considered motorized vehicles.
Yep.
So we allow them on our OHV trails.
Yep.
We do have a method of exemption now where a manager can exempt e-bikes or allow e-bikes to be used on trails that are just open traditional bikes. But it's quite a process. It's a full board NEPA process.
Forest Service is the same way.
Or serve the same way.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that came, and if my memory is correct, didn't Christopher Dowse say 2 years ago that they were considered by the Federal Highway Administration to be a motorized?
That's exactly where my direction
That's
is
the
coming
federal
from.
I think
DOT.
that's right.
So,
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just trying to get a feel for.
I'm hoping, I've heard that there's some rumblings from, way above my head that they're potentially reconsidering how RTP acts with the e-bikes and whatnot, if we can make them non-motorized or, consider them differently. But that's where we are today.
They're really not non-motorized though. I mean, they change the recreation
Totally.
on the trail, like they're a
Yes.
lot, they're
Yeah,
way
there's
faster.
It just
than
gets really tricky.
Yeah,
In this like detailed, like how
Yep.
do we categorize?
yeah.
But either way, in the past, there's been times where people thought because they allowed e-bikes, they couldn't get RTP funding. That's not true at all. You're fully eligible. We just slap a
Diversified.
diversified title
Makes
on it
sense.
instead of motorized.
Senate Bill 387 failed on third reading in the Senate, and that was the e-bike bill. So this is the third session in a row, they've not passed an e-bike bill in our legislature. The whole debate is over natural surface designated non-motorized trails. That's the whole debate. Everything else is their classifications that were in the bill this year match the federal classifications. The bill appeared to allow e-bikes on any trail that's open to bicycles. And that was the big debate because a lot of designated non-motorized natural surface trails are open to bicycles. That's where the debate came from. That's how it died again. So there's another group. The last time there was a group put together to try to come to a compromise on it. They thought they had within a week before the session and then fell apart. Same thing happened 2 years ago, and they're going to try to put together a group to work on it again this next year because e-bikes are here.
Mhm.
They are.
But it won't change the federal
No,
statute at all because, I mean, most of our lands are public lands,
Yeah.
BLM, Forest Service, right? So, I mean, the bill would only affect state trails. in a
city,
sense, right?
city, state, and the Private Landowners Association had a concern about the bill. Matter of fact, they were the most outspoken against the bill this year, so. yeah.
Jason's right. I think a lot of people had the perception that it would apply to like BLM
Yeah.
Forest Service lands.
No,
We can't say that enough. It wouldn't, right? So. yeah,
that was
always-
part of the argument against it was inconsistency or
Yeah.
lack thereof. The state law had passed, so then you're traveling from a city of Helena trail in the South Hills to a Forest Service trail, all of a sudden the rules changed.
Yep.
So consistency was one of the issues too.
All right, always a good convoluted discussion.
E-bikes are so fun.
You know we're gonna get an e-bike.
All to say is that they're diversified in our program. So moving on, diversified projects, going through one by one. First here, highest ranking in this category was the Billings Trail Net project. This was actually a primarily signage project for their trail systems. The internal committee, just like this project, they felt it improved experience and safety. It was something a little different. So they suggested full funding for this project, and it did rank the highest in this category.
That looks a little high for the trail net project, doesn't
Don't start fights.
You can slap me, Chris.
Defend yourself.
Do we have any questions, comments, feedback, pushback?
No.
Again, some of these are gonna reappear. They were education, but they are also considered diversified, so they are part of the bucket. This is the Avalanche Foundation, where I talked about partial funding 40,000 of the 45. And it also ranked very well in this category. This is one of the best applications they've sent us. It was pretty good. Moving on, we have the city of Three Forks. This ranked high in this category. This was for crack and reseal, a part of their Rails to Trails project over by Three Forks and between Three Forks and Headwaters. We did talk about this project a little bit yesterday in TSP. I know yesterday the perspective was a little bit different on this type of project. From the perspective of the internal committee, it was a well-written application. It ranked high. They did see a lot of the value and upkeeping these types of surfaces. They last a long time and get high use. There's a lot of people down there, and it provides a certain experience and a wide range of opportunity and accessibility. That they felt it was a well-deserved project. I know the cost is high on these, but we also feel, and this is kind of a conversation that's been had in the past, that we offer up to $100,000 in request for a reason, because some projects are expensive. So anyway, we can continue that conversation here, of course. I'm totally open to all thoughts.
And why is this considered diversified?
Because of e-bikes.
Gotcha.
And it's part of the Great American Rail Trail project too, which is a high priority for the Rails to Trails Conservancy. So it's a key portion of that.
And it ties into that Headwaters State Park.
Yeah, it's called the Headwaters Trails.
Yeah,
as a
so
matter
it's
of
all
fact.
tied in there.
Yeah, it ties the city of Three Forks to the state park, and now they're working on tying that segment over to Bozeman and over to Bozeman too. Then we had sat in a national meeting about 2 weeks ago. The Rails to Trails Conservancy sponsored it about the Great American Rail Trail, and they're working on segments right now to make those connections. So.
Seems like a good project and a well-written application.
It was written. I hadn't read that. Oh, so we said full or partial fund, but we talked about mobilization costs and if they had to come out again to do another portion. So if we could just get as much done in one go, it would probably be a little cheaper than trying to split up that type of project, which is the same argument we've made in the past for these types of crack and seal type projects. Feels like everybody is sitting okay so far.
You were afraid of Gene Townsend, weren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Scared out of my mind. No. The next project we have here, this was the city of Billings. This was also for repair and repaving of the riverfront park that runs south of Lake Josephine for about 0.38 miles. We had a very similar discussion as we did with the Three Forks project. We said it did fall into that like middle category of scoring. They said fund to the extent possible. And the discussion was again, like, if we could just get as much done in one go, it probably in the long run be a little bit easier than trying to break it up into smaller portions. There was talk about just that accessibility piece that my internal committee felt strongly about, and felt that this would add a lot of good opportunity in the area. I think this project also talked about some erosion issues that hopefully the paving would help prevent or just provide some longevity to the trail, et cetera, et cetera. Open to comment, questions, concerns.
I think it's a really good project. It's one of the most highly used trails in Billings. And I know we talked about it yesterday because it's phase 2 of this similar project we talked about yesterday. It'll be a really big benefit to the community with high impact, high use.
We're at 8:45.
Great. So it sounds like agreement, full fund on that one. It is 8:45, so we're gonna go ahead and open it up to public comments. I'm going to stop sharing my screen really quick. Oh no, I don't do that. Do we have any public comment in the room? Have the floor.
Sorry, this is,
Name and address or?
Just name who you're with and then you can go ahead.
My name is Karina Martin. I lived in the Heights for 18 years with my husband. We've been homeowners. We used to live on the east side of Main Street near Bitterroot and Wicks. Now we live up by Skyview near the new bypass trail. I'd like to comment on the proposal you have for signage on Alkali Creek, Black Otter, Kiwanis area down to Colson Park. We've actually walked, rode, or run on all of these areas of trail, and I think the part near Main Street and Metro where it diverges off to go either to Kiwanis or up towards Black Otter and Alkali Creek is incredibly difficult for people in this area to use because of the lack of signage. It's very hard to go from one side of Main Street to the other and feel like you're doing it correctly and not trespassing on people's land. My husband used to ride his bike out to Lockwood Fire before he retired almost every shift during the summer. And he had to run through that area several times to ensure he had the right path so he wasn't trespassing. And he uses it now as part of a training loop for marathon running. And he will come back from his runs regularly and say, yeah, I saw somebody with a stroller, with a bike, whatever, trying to, dodge and weave and figure out where they're supposed to be going. So we use trails in Rapid City is probably the closest sized city, and their trails are exceptionally user friendly. And I have not found that area of ours to be the same. And I think if it was, you would have a lot more traffic coming from the east side to the west side and vice versa on those areas of trail.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I'm gonna stand in front and give a speech. Is that okay? My name is Shelley and I run the Boot Hill Inn up here in the Heights. I have some notes, so forgive me if I refer to those. As you know, and as she said so beautifully, the trails are very popular with our locals. I have been at the Boot Hill Inn for 24 years, so I've watched them develop, I watched them build, and I see the activity on the trails. I use them often. My employees use them often. But I'm here today to speak on behalf of my guests, those folks from out of town who come in to use our trails. The Boot Hill Inn offers bike loads when, during the summer months, during the nicer time. And while we try to explain to them, you can go east, you can go west, especially if they are heading east, we say, okay, you're gonna get to this place, and if you turn this way, you're gonna end up at Two Moon Park, but you gotta watch, there's gonna be an ice arena, and you're gonna wanna turn there, and it gets very confusing for them. The other thing that confuses them too often is where the underpasses are, and we tell our guests, don't try to cross Main Street. Don't try to cross Airport Road. They're very dangerous. There's an underpass right here. And once again, when we try to explain them, walk past the sandwich shop and then weave around, it does get confusing. And these trails are so beautiful, and we can be as user-friendly as Rapid City's trail system with the help of some signage. So thank you for the opportunity to just share my mind on that. I appreciate all that you guys do for our state. Thank you.
Any other public comment in the room?
I'll just make a quick one. I'm gonna take too much time, but I know that this is a lot of the eligibility was for education and for safety. And this is a safety issue because when people don't really feel safe, when I've ridden those trails and I showed you the video, you know, it looks pretty terrifying if you don't know the trail system, to be going down, you know, a place where you don't know how long it is. There's going to be a bathroom, you know, what you're going to run into. So I think that we've just we kind of suffer signage in the city, and this is an especially difficult one because it's, you know, there is tourism, and it goes from the rims to the river, and yeah. So thank you very much for this and your time. Thank you.
Any other public comment? Right, we'll go online.
Sorry, Stephanie, Chris Lawrence.
Yep.
Steely Lake Nordic. I wanted to thank the committee listening in. I am really impressed with the amount of thought that you all put into these applications. We did listen through last year and decided to do as suggested and put in for 2 years worth of grooming. And of course, an equipment purchase. These grants make it all possible. Very much appreciate RTP and TSP. So thank you. We're trying to put it out there on the ground.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other public comment online?
Sealy Lake Nordic Ski Club.
Right.
Okay. All right, well, with that, I think that closes public comment, and we will go back to our review. Now we wait for the lag.
Thank you.
Thanks, ladies.
For those online, we have a screen here in the room, but every time I share my screen, it just lags behind for a little bit, so we're just waiting for that to load.
Was the city of Billings signage in one or the other grants that they were speaking of?
That was that TrailNet project that ranked high, and we didn't decide to fully fund.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so on the education and safety stuff, there was nothing in there for them, right? Or
No, so I think for this project, we did not consider that like an education awareness project. And maybe it's like awareness and education, printed materials, things like that. And this feels more like on the trail infrastructure. So we did not put it in that category unless someone wants to hold the red flag and be like, got ya.
no, I just curious though, so that potentially their funding is there then what they're requesting.
Yeah, we have them as a full fund as a diversified project.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So. Okay, I think we just had finished the City of Billings. And we are now moving on to the Bibler Legacy Foundation. This project was talked about a little bit yesterday as well as part of the funding they applied to TSP. The RTP portion of the RTP application for their portion of the project was for a new trail in the new Ashley Creek Park. They ranked kind of middle of the pack, but folks really saw a lot of potential for this area, this trail system that seemed to be like a connecting piece between different trail systems. They really thought it had a lot of high potential. It's the only park in that area, or will be the only park in that area. Really good connector piece. This funding is just for the trail portion. So they said to partially fund or to fund as much as we could. So they requested 100,000 and we put 95 down for a starting point. And that was simply just trying to move some funding around. They were kind of middle of the pack, but we definitely felt like it had a really good potential.
Yeah, just a tremendous local commitment there to, they're just asking for a little bit of help, but most of it is private funds from local.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I thought this one was good because it was the trails as opposed to our discussion yesterday,
With the
parking lot.
Yeah.
So this one was great.
Yeah.
And you did say there are signed documents. My notes here was there's no signed documents, but there is.
There is, yeah. We received them after, because they were still getting them signed and whatnot when they submitted. But I do have the signed. Yeah. Other thoughts, questions?
Those signed documents are about turning it over to the
Yeah.
city? Okay.
It's pretty much the city committing, like, we're gonna take this over, it's gonna be, we're gonna maintain it, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, this thing's already partially built. I mean, it's already well on the way, so.
I'm very excited to visit this place in the future. It sounds
It's
like it'll
awesome.
be very nice.
Ooh, our next meeting, and we could
Awesome.
do our after
There you go.
meeting walk there.
Oh, there you go.
Sounds good.
Okay. So moving right along here, we have the US Forest Service Hebgen Lake Ranger District requesting almost 100,000. They ranked middle of the pack. The internal committee requested a partial fund. They just do a lot. I mean, they have both winter and summer trail crews that help out with those systems down there. Their winter ones, you know, it kind of all ties in with the West Yellowstone Trail systems and kind of keeping those heavily used areas up to par. So we said to partially fund. I have them drafted at a $65,000 right now. We can always discuss or change that. I'll open it up to comment. This is a fairly typical request from them. They're kind of a frequent RTP recipient.
Do you typically fund them partially, or is it all over the board over the course between 18 and 24?
I think it changes year to year. There's been years where we fully funded them. There's years where we funded them on the low end, on the middle end. I think it just kind of depended, where their application fell in the pack. And just trying to keep it somewhat fair in that regard. I think the big thing is just
He's a great guy.
it's such a heavily used area.
Commander.
He's been a friend.
So we can see
His brother's over in Dillon.
fair to the group at this stage.
He left Bose and went to Dillon.
Right.
So Adam is.
The next one I have listed here is the Avalanche Center, the Gallatin National Forest. We already talked about this one. This was an education project, funding them partially at 40,000. So we'll go ahead and move on to the next one, since we already talked about that. The next one is the Bozeman Ranger District. This is again for trail crews. The conversation around this one, they kind of fell middle low of the pack as far as ranking. But it is such a large area, heavily used area. So they were hoping to see this, the internal committee was hoping to see this partially funded at around half. They requested 60,000-ish and we put in for 32,000. I think in their application, they said this would fund, this was like their priority, these dollars for like two trail folks, something to that effect. Keep up the work in that area.
Yeah.
Questions, comments, pushback? Yeah. Okay. Next, we have the Wildcat Development LLC. This was for some trail development. This area was actually part of an HOA, and it kind of was the HOA taking on this project. We thought it was a good project, generally speaking, but there were a lot of concerns from the committee around public access because of where it was located. And how we just didn't, it was hard to see how much public use would get out of the trail system outside of the HOA.
Right.
So it was like a fairly decent application, but mainly because of that concern and a few other notes, we did decide to go with a no fund on this one.
Good.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I agree. It's on private land, isn't it?
Essentially, yeah.
Yeah.
That's what it felt like.
Yeah.
It's expensive stuff
Private
too.
club trails.
Cool. Okay. The next one, we have the Kootenai Cross Country Ski Club. This is one of our smaller operations. I'm trying to find my notes here really quick. Okay, yeah. So they came in, the application got a little confusing. It seemed in the application they were gonna request funds for equipment like a mower and these other things. And then you got to the actual budget and it was for grooming. And then the match was the mower.
Yeah.
So we took a lot of like, well, that's kind of confusing. So that definitely pushed them down as far as the score was concerned. However, the committee did want to show support for like these smaller operations, these rural operations. So they did request or say a partial funding of 6,000 of the 12, open to discussion with contingent that we rediscuss match, because I don't know if those funds are for grooming and the match they had in the application was just for the mower. So that seemed like to be a little bit of an interesting crossover if there was like other volunteer stuff that they could use as match, which they've done in the past. So I don't think it would be a big deal for them. And I'm open to comments on this. I know the application did get a little away.
So are you saying that the committee would suggest that they use this 6,000 for grooming?
Yes.
Okay.
That's technically what was in the budget.
That's what I see
Yeah,
here, yeah.
It was just the application that threw you off.
Mm-hmm.
Because when they said the Laura Foundation was paying for the groomer, that's when it clarified it for me.
And it's
What-
two
what
seasons of grooming too, right?
It was,
The
but in
description
this, we would only be
talks
paying
that
for
they don't want a
one
mower.
because of the
Yeah, I-
score.
Right.
Threw me off.
It threw me pretty off too.
Yeah, I remember that, like you said a minute ago, it was a bit confusing, but then at one point they said the Laura Foundation was paying for the groomer, the mower, the equipment, so.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah,
So that's what kind of clarified it.
right, yeah.
It's a good, they're small, but they're doing a lot of good work up there. I know one of the members of the club. And
Yeah.
It's a good operation.
So if there's a chance that we misinterpreted what they meant, I mean, when you actually go to award this to them and you find out, oh, it's something different, then that can change, or how does that work?
It's a very good question. What do you think?
Just the thought, like we ask them to review a draft budget table before we have to sign a contract, right? So that
Yeah.
would potentially be a time that some of that could be clarified.
Right.
And I wonder if they just wrote the application that way, thinking like if they were gonna use the mower as the match, that they needed to make the mower part of the project.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Cause it's, that's the money for the match, I guess. So I wonder if it's just how they wrote the application.
The way, yeah, I mean, the way it was written was probably the weakest point.
Yeah.
For sure. I mean, we've worked with this group many times in the past and they do well with the RTP. They're very successful. This is probably the first time they threw me through a loop and I don't know. I think they were trying something different and it just kind of fell a little wonky at the end. But I think personally at this stage, we would maybe try and push to just stick with the grooming if they need that.
Yeah.
And not the mower. I guess it's all a little
Sounds like they're gonna get their mower anyway.
Yeah, well, that's the thing.
That's where the confusion
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
Okay,
That'd be it. So.
yeah, yeah,
And their
that's fair.
implementation, it states that the RTP funding would support the grooming for 2 seasons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think we're in agreement, partial fund, grooming.
Yeah.
Mhm. Okay, the next one is the Beartooth Recreational Trails Association. This is another grooming operation, smaller grooming operation. Finding my notes here. We did say that they were missing some specifics and the intent of some questions. Partial fund encouraged to come back again. I think this one was a 2-year funding operation. I'm trying to remember, this is where all things start to clash together. Oh, right, this one specifically was actually for property lease fees and plowing of the Nordic Center. I think the conversation with internally ended with just funding the lease portion of the Nordic Center and foregoing the plowing aspect. There was also some back and forth conversation of like, the plowing's technically on a road, we technically don't do road improvements. And there's been a lot of back and forth over the last couple of years about what to do about plowing. So I feel like in this case, we've, based on scoring and other criteria, sticking with just the lease, assisting with the funding the lease for the Nordic Center.
What does Federal Highway Administration say about plowing roads?
So, oh, Katie, do you want to pop in? I talked about this with Jeff in the past, and he's kind of said, we've kind of always been in a wonky zone. They were like plowing of trailheads in the past because it seems critical to, if it seems critical to the operation, then we've moved forward with that. Plowing of roads, Jeff saw as like a no-go. At the same time, internal committee has said, well, that feels also critical to accessing those winter recreational areas. So it's kind of gone back and forth a lot, but Katie, I'll let you talk.
Sure, I think this is one of those areas where there's probably not a black and white answer. And so using our best judgment is the way to go. And I am in total agreement that the parking lot areas, using RTP funding for plowing, that makes a lot of sense. I think looking at the ownership of the roadways to access to determine some eligibility also makes sense. If you're driving county roads to access a trailhead, I would see the county as being the responsible entity to do that plowing. But I feel like this is more of a case-by-case basis to really discuss eligibility on plowing roads and really looking at that underlying ownership.
And the way the road situation is there, if you all haven't been to the that area, it's in Red Lodge, is the road gets plowed up until like maybe a mile or two from the trailhead, and then it's Forest Service gravel road, and they don't plow past that area. So to get to the trailhead, they plow, and it's a really popular like regional ski area, snowmobile, and then also they have like some pedestrian like snow bike, snowshoeing, that kind of stuff. So that plowing is just to get you to the place where you can park and start recreating.
Right. This
So,
is it's the way it's been considered in the state's snowmobile program. I know. I keep saying I've been retired for 16 years. The department, through the snowmobile program, has paid for plowing part of the Beartooth Highway now, not any longer, but to get people up to one of the switchbacks so they could ride up on top. That was a long time ago, but then up at the Teton ski area, it's also a snowmobile trailhead, and we played for some plowing of access and parking lot up there with state snowmobile grant money in the past. So in another program, it's been considered reasonable.
Yeah.
This is definitely one of those topics I really would love. Last year we didn't get to because there was so much transition with like TSP and the stack and whatnot. I would love to get something in our like guidelines to applicants that more clearly defines in this realm, like what we will and won't do.
sure, and so they can explain it better, like if it's
Exactly.
if it's critical.
What we're going to accept and what we're not going
Yeah.
to accept, because it is, like Katie said, it's kind of a gray area,
Yeah.
case by case.
And their equipment trailer is at the trailhead, so like they can't even get there to do their grooming
No.
unless they can drive there.
Fair.
So
We have a similar thing in Kalispell, but the snowmobile club does groom that portion of the Canyon Creek Road, so I don't know how that works, but it's listed as one of the functions of the grant, so. But but I mean, it's half or 3/4 of a mile, but then you get to your 30-acre parking lot or whatever.
Yeah.
So, but you can't get there if you don't have a road.
All good discussion. All that said, based on where the application fell, we were still probably gonna go with the partial and just prioritizing this year, the lease portion of it. I think the lease was technically like $6,000 and we put it at 72, so maybe it can help go towards a little bit. That's not very much.
Yeah, no,
But
they
a
do
little
great
bit
work.
towards
I
that.
think they'll do a lot with that.
Yeah. And then again, maybe just expect a more full discussion and something to put in our guidelines this upcoming year.
This is another one that I had a problem with the project description too. It reads machine grooming of West Fork Road and RL Nordic Center. It doesn't say anything about a lease or plowing or anything. So that's another one that I had a problem with, that just right out of the gate.
Totally.
As far as confusing.
That's really good feedback.
Otherwise, I'm fine with what you decided.
Yeah, no, that's good feedback to provide. Next one, this is a group we reviewed a TSP application for yesterday as well, Friends of the Little Belts. This one is the diversified application, doing both motorized and non-motorized trails. We already talked about cutting out the education, sort of map printing portion of the project. I think we mentioned it yesterday maybe, but this application did fall a little bit to the bottom. Still want to show support for this project, this area, etc. So they said suggested a partial funding. So we drafted them at about $38,000 of the original 100,000 or 65 for the maintenance, funding about half of the maintenance roughly. Thoughts?
I think it's good.
Yeah.
It's good.
Okay, then falling to the bottom kind of the pack here, we have the Friends of the Avalanche Center. We already talked about that one. Education wasn't able to fund it. This last one, Helena Ultra Runners League. This one was to purchase, I believe, a
Side by side.
yeah, a side-by-side UTV for trail maintenance in the Elkhorn specifically. They use that route for their marathon.
No,
It's an ultra.
It's an ultra.
Yes.
Ultra.
I should get that from the title. But I'm
It's
not a
a-
runner, I don't know the difference.
Grueling.
Longer,
Yeah.
worse.
So there was a lot of aspects that the committee liked about the project in general. They were supportive of the cause, but the scope is limited. And just based on where the application fell, may not be able to fund this cycle. They said they'd like to see and encourage this application again in the future. Or if TSB in the future was able to fund equipment. They felt there was definitely a benefit, but it just was hard to make the cause with the scoring. Thoughts, comments, pushback, arguments?
I know the group real well because two of the organizers live near where I do, and it's a good event. But it appeared to be primarily for an event. That's the way I read the application at least.
Yeah.
And they do, they're getting some a fair amount of cooperation from the Capital Trail Vehicle Riders Association with this event. So, and the whole scope of things.
But they are clearing some trails too, right?
Some, yeah, they
So,
did mention that in their app.
That's what I took notice of too, is that they are doing trail work to have the event.
See that oriented, yeah. I'd love to see us give us some money, but given the competition for money, it's
It's
tough.
endlessly difficult.
It did seem like they were opening up trails like that, that's kind of a front trail that would have more backcountry access, which I thought was cool. Would it be like, would they do better in the future if they partnered with other groups and like just use that equipment for other projects? Because it did seem limited.
Yeah, I think there could be a lot of opportunity where they partnered in that. There's way, like they mentioned how they have been able to use like other, I mean, I get it, when you have your own for this specific thing, it is really nice. You don't have to worry, there's so many things you don't have to worry about. But yeah, I mean, like the group even said like they would totally encourage another application in the future, and maybe there's more of that partnership involvement, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we're gonna move on here. We're moving on to our biggest category, non-motorized. Do we need a break now, or do we wanna do this?
Keep going.
So looking at non-motorized. First application here, Glacier Nordic Ski Club. They were our highest ranking application, I think, overall this cycle. It was just, the group felt it was really well written. So we threw a full fund at it. I know they do good work, worked with in the past, never had any problems. Yeah, just high ranking. Sealy Lake Nordic Ski Club. This was like a year for cross-country ski applications. I just felt like they did a really good job. They requested 83,000, also a high scoring project. A chunk of the pie was for a UTV for assisting them in their maintenance and whatnot. I think that was 28,000. The committee did kind of go back and forth on whether or not, looking at all the applications as a whole and how to spread money around, if we wanted to fund the UTV or not. Right now, just purely based on where they fell in the ranking, I went back and forth numerous times, and right now I went back to full funding just because of the ranking situation. We can always open that up to a fuller discussion when we look at it. I will say in this category, the way things are currently drafted, I'm actually over budget by about $17,000 because there was just some hard decisions to make, and I haven't totally figured out the dollars and cents. And that was part of the dollars and cents, just like where can we like move funding around for different projects and spread it around, but at the same time, you know, last year we talked really high and heavily about funding equipment, and I do think that is an important thing to do with the FABA waiver that we have, or the de minimis waiver. So that's why I have it currently at full funding. We've gone back and forth a lot, so thoughts, comments?
I took notice of some things in there as far as the grooming goes, that there's some redundancy or doubling up on equipment rental and operator pay.
So
compared to
there's
grooming per hour.
There's the groomer hour, the machine hour, and then there's the human hour, and those are two different things.
But they also have rent in there for the groomer.
Unless, or are they for, is that for a different? Okay.
It's in this application that I noticed, there's equipment rental and operator, and then dollars per hour for grooming.
So the groomer hour is at like $120 an hour or $20 an hour. That is for oil, gas, and general maintenance.
Okay.
But if they're also renting it from someone, they're getting it, like they're leasing it or whatnot, that's like a different
cost. Not included in the dollars per hour then.
Yeah, it's not included. So it's like a separate, you're getting the equipment from someone, you're paying them to use it, and then here's the oil, gas, and maintenance, and then the human hour. So there's a lot of different.
So you can break all those out. That's not all included in the dollars per hour.
Not from, no.
Okay.
Yeah. The per hour is specifically for oil, gas, and general maintenance.
Okay.
Any other thoughts on that? I know that's a good question.
It's a great project.
Yeah.
Can I add a 1 minute? Chris Lawrence, who is the one that spoke about this project. He used to be one of our park managers for state parks way back. And when I was managing the RTP program, he came in 1 week to assist with review of applications. And he did it so he could learn how to put in a good trail application. So
Well,
he's,
he learned.
yes.
He
he's a good one.
Okay, I think people are supportive at this stage. Next one, we have Salway Bitterroot Frank Church Foundation. Internal committee suggested a full or partial fund. I have them at a full funding limit right now. This is a fairly typical request of them, but we just felt that they are very successful. They do good work. A lot of local support over there. Comments?
I thought it was good.
Yeah. And it's one of those where it feels like a fairly low dollar amount for the amount of work that they do.
That's what my comment was.
Yeah. Next one, we have the Lincoln County project. I have to reorganize my stuff. This is for repaving a 0.33 mile trail section and adding signage. I believe this was at this is the Kootenai Falls one. I believe so. I know it was a popular area and it just like helped connect some better access to the trail. And honestly, for $23,000, it's probably one of the cheaper repaving projects I've ever seen.
Yeah, it's a hugely popular area.
Yeah. So we definitely suggested full or partial funding. I went with full funding, and honestly, for where it scored and what they're gonna do with it, it felt like a pretty easy fund.
I was there last fall and it's desperately needed, yeah.
Perfect. Good. Good one to support.
You gotta park a long way away.
That's got a little mobility issue, so it gets
All right.
challenging.
Next one, Bridger Ski Foundation. This project, there was a lot in their request, their budget request. They did write a pretty good application. They always write a good application. Because of that, the internal committee said to fund to the extent possible. I did go through their budget line items, and I think we kind of decided to try and stick to the primary functions, which was grooming the trails. That's the thing that we're like the most known for funding, is that trail maintenance. So that's what I tried to do here, is stick to the dollar amounts requested for grooming. So they requested 65, which included a number of things, and we're saying 52 for those core functions. Happy with that?
This is your Pat Flowers maybe too,
Right.
again,
Gotta keep them happy.
Senate
Keeping
Minority
them
Leader.
Next, Absaroka Beartooth Wilderness Foundation requested almost 45,000. Internal committee said, good application, always good to support. Fund to the extent possible, and just in trying to start moving funds around, I put them at 40,000 for now. Fairly typical request, always successful, always uses the funds.
Yeah, it looked like they had a lot of partners too. A lot of
Lots
local partners.
Okay. Next one, we have the City of Glasgow. This one was a trail rehabilitation and ADA project for about 2 miles. Internal committee really liked this project, wanted to show a lot of support for it. I think TSP paid, I guess, a phase 1 or another portion of this project. either in the previous cycle or the cycle before. Area of the state doesn't see a lot of RTP requests that over there. So fund to the extent possible. They requested 100, we said 90. Questions?
That looked like a good project and they had a huge cash match.
Yeah.
So
Yes, they
that-
did.
that's-
That was
what I
another
wrote
big
down, too.
bonus,
Yeah.
when we saw the application, we really like to see that, like, all that skin in the game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And historically, RTP money originally paid for this trail.
Oh, there you go.
Oh, 20 years ago. I'm guessing about 20 years ago. So, yeah.
Interesting. There you go.
Oh, that's a long time ago.
Yeah.
You're watching
Like they have to come back to the well repeatedly, year after year after year after year. And then come back with a big ask.
Well,
Yeah, it's a $1.1 million project, so.
Yeah.
That's chunky.
Yeah.
Bob?
Sorry, I had a question.
Yeah.
I think one of the things they were using for the match was the TA money, but it didn't sound like they had it yet. Is that, did I read that properly?
I'm gonna have to pull that up.
I was just wondering if that was something that we need to consider, like if that doesn't materialize, does it still go forward?
It's all very good questions here. This is where my memory starts to get.
Well, yeah, I'm just going from my notes. I mean, I definitely didn't remember that off the top of my head.
Let's see.
They get money
Four
next
C
year.
was the question, maybe? Let's see here.
It would be under the budget section, narrative. This says cash match total of, well, 900,000 is comprised of the city of Glasgow match 12,000. So that's city of Glasgow, TIS.
City of Glasgow is also requesting 800,620 from the Montana Transportation Alternatives Program.
I think that's above and beyond. So
Two
they're
years.
only required 20% match
Oh, okay,
at 42,000. And here they have so many different
okay.
categories listed that it's saying like there's city match, there's labor match, there's other grant match.
Okay.
So even without that TA fund, like they have the match.
Okay.
Way above and beyond. And really, like when we report these federally, we put them in the federal system. I can only report that 20%. So a lot of times people will add more match to their application because they think it will up their score, but it doesn't because I can't even report on that federally.
Okay.
So that's great. That's great for them. Cool to see. But they only need like that $42,000 for one, or not even 25. Okay, next we have the Bob Marshall Wilderness Foundation. I think we talked about them yesterday. Just a real supported group, does so much. They requested 69,000. We are suggesting a partial fund at about 50,000, or at least that's where the level is at right now. Questions? Comments, feedback?
It's good.
Yeah.
Just spread it around.
And you can count on them to always do a good job too, I think. Haven't you had good luck with stuff?
Yeah, no, they're another one of those groups that where they spend the money pretty darn fast. They get it done. They're very effective. I've just lost my place here. I'm trying to find where I am. Well, I know we said we could just plow through all this, but would anyone be opposed to a quick 5-minute break? All right, let's take a quick 5-minute break. Coming back at 9:30. Yeah, just call it 9:35. Because my throat's so dry.
Can I jump in real quick once everybody sit down?
Yeah.
Okay.
Once we get all the slackers back in.
Have any interaction with you?
A lot.
Oh, a lot.
Oh, okay. I work 10 steps from our office. Oh. No, we're good buddies.
I don't wanna eat.
Did you know I live next door?
I think I trade one
We're
for
gone.
Brandon, I'm like, you sure you wanna trade it in?
Yeah.
Might be easier just to
Fix it.
you do it, instead of dealing with all these
Your husband's
sensors.
awesome.
Yeah, Brian, I don't know him
You
really
know what I
well.
mean?
Just
Just
a little
can't
bit,
work
yeah.
on it.
Oh, he's really good.
Yeah.
So we had another offer of a trail visit, to, I believe it's the Trails on Top of the Rim. I can't remember the name that they had them. It was like, side cut or something like that. But the Trails on Top of the Rim, after today's meeting, is anybody interested in that? I didn't commit us. I said we'd talk it over. I know a lot of folks are driving home, so.
I got a long drive. I'm headed out.
Yeah, I'm heading out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks for the offer though.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
Is it the same group, Christie?
That was real nice. I thought going out last night, just need to see a project.
Rob's waiting on me, I'm sorry. Okay. So we just finished discussing the Bob Marshall Wilderness Foundation. So now we're moving into this kind of second block of applications and non-motorized, these kind of middle of the pack applications. First one here with the city of Helena. This was to do some bike trail development. I'm just trying to get my papers in the right order here.
Well, they're called the Easy Trail. Yeah.
So this is 0.8 miles of new bike trail. This application, we went back and forth a little bit on to whether or not to fund. In the original allocations, when we didn't have that extra 300,000, we had them as a no fund. But then we got that funding. And then we looked at both Helena, City of Helena and the Whitefish Legacy Partners, and they scored exactly the same. So we were trying to figure out the best way to, do as much as we can with as little as we have. So if they scored the same, we felt that we should try and partially fund both these projects. It was a decent application. They said in competition, didn't seem as critical as some other comparative projects, but they would be happy to partially fund this if we could. So I have them, they requested 21,000. I put down 15,000 for this project as a starting point. Other comments, questions on that application?
Well, it's bike and pedestrian,
Oh, thank you.
not just bike.
That is very true, actually.
Yeah, I know it. I probably, well, the city of Helena, it's a PPLT, so I can talk.
Yeah.
No, it's a good project. It's needed badly. And it's not just a bike trail. It's like all the South Hills Trail is bike and
True.
pedestrian.
I think the application just geared more bike. But yes, I totally see what you're saying. So 15,000 for this 21. It's honestly pretty, another like development project that doesn't cost very much.
It looked like it was a really good connector that was
There are
needed.
some connecting
Yeah.
points.
Yeah.
Are all those South Hill trails bikes allowed?
Yeah. Not e-bikes.
Not
e-bikes.
That is why they're under the non-motorized categories, because they specifically don't allow e-bikes.
That's because it's on federal land, is that?
City,
right?
not
City.
city. It's a city policy.
Decision to not have e-bikes.
Yeah,
Well,
they
they're
connect
also,
with.
they look a little bit like, not quite as wide, right? They're 40
40
inches
inch.
wide, so I think e-bikes would probably, I mean, I can see why they might not want e-bikes. It's kind of hard for passing at high speed.
Well, actually, Helena is like Missoula, it's like Bozeman. They have city ordinances that do not allow e-bikes on the natural surface, non-motorized designated trails.
Mm.
So it's a city ordinance.
Gotcha.
And of course, it connects with Forest Service trails too, which have the same policy, so.
Which is almost logical, I guess, to have in way.
Okay. So we're in fair-ish agreement.
I'm in okay. with
Yeah.
that.
Whitefish Legacy Partners, they requested 100,000. A chunk of this request was for general sort of maintenance type work, and a portion of it was for new construction, new trail construction. Again, we kind of went back and forth with this application. They always do well. It was a pretty decent written application. I think in the past, maybe they came through a little bit higher. This year they fell more middle of the pack as far as scoring is concerned. There were a few things in the maintenance category of their request that kind of raised some red flags as far as RTP eligibility. There was like pumping of the latrines and whatnot. I don't think that would be eligible. We can't, there's some language in the RTP guidance that you can't do like routine trailhead maintenance, and I think that falls under that category. And just some things that I didn't feel was stuck to the core of what RTP is for. So we said, could we focus funding on the trail development portion of it? I think in the request, it was about 65 for trail development. So we are suggesting a $40,000 support for the development portion of their application.
We funded them yesterday at 60,000 out of 100.
Was that for development or maintenance, or do we remember?
Believe it was
Same basic verbiage on their description of the project.
similar mix of both different areas, I believe.
Moving to feedback. Part of this again is that the city of Helena and Whitefish, they scored the same, so we're trying to find like what seems like the best way to distribute.
286,000 users a year, it says. Whitefish, I mean,
Yeah.
it's phenomenal up there.
Yeah.
Phenomenal. They got a ton of money. I'm opposed to them. Because they got a ton of money in the bank.
Yeah.
But yet they're so good. It's so good. That's just me.
They do also have 2 active R2P agreements right now for trail construction. I have full faith in them. They are a beast of an organization. They will get those projects done. But that was also kind of the partial funding discussion. It's like, well, they do have 2 active construction projects with us. We want to still show like it's a good project. Can we say like we support this? And I'm sure you'll make up the difference.
There's a lot of money up there for sure. Yeah, they'll keep doing what they need to do.
And this Murray Lake Trail is gonna be a good one.
I bet.
Well funded.
Yeah, I've been up there. I've toured some of their trails that they've like funded with RTP and stuff in the past, and they're just,
It's incredible.
yeah,
And
they're great.
we did partial fund, Whitefish Legacy, right now we're at 60 of 100,000. Which was to fund the type of maintenance, and then City of Helena right now is unfunded for TSP.
Okay. Well, I think it's good to spread it around.
Moving down, we have the Beaverhead Deer Lodge Pentler Ranger District. This is where funding gets really tight. I mean, you can kind of, see, kind of gets ahead of you here. There's not a whole lot of funding left in this category. The Pentler Ranger District, this was for some trail development for cross-country ski trails. There were some miscellaneous pieces that they wanted to construct. What were our comments on this one? I have to find. Yep, 3 new Nordic ski trail routes. We said we liked the projects, but didn't seem like critical infrastructure considering the scoring and funding available. They did apply last year. And we asked them to come back. This application was better, I would say, than it was last year, but it still kind of fell in the middle of the pack.
Did they say no partial funding or no?
No, I think everyone agreed to partial funding. It kind of came down to how much money do we have available?
They didn't in their application say no partial funding. They wouldn't accept
No,
it.
they said they would
They
accept
would.
partial funding. It was just if we could provide partial funding. Unless people feel like super strong about this project and like, we gotta find funding for this. But it kind of felt like one of those, and I could be wrong. There's lots of trails up there. It's great. It's a great experience. I could see where some of those extra pieces would be nice. But it's kind of like, it would be really great to have, but I don't know if it's like critical.
A lot of times I don't agree with all what you guys say, but I wrote my comments a couple weeks ago already about these. I said, no partial funding, no, nothing, don't fund them. So scaring myself, I'm so much in agreement with you.
And there's already a new ski trail there. It's just what they're trying to do
They're
is
trying
make
to-
it easier for novice skiers for its short segments, so.
Right.
It could go either way, and I totally get it. I cross-country ski up there, and there is one section, it's really steep, and I think one of these trails would make like an easier path around.
Yeah.
Which I totally get. Again, all these projects are so important, and they all have really great merit. It comes down to how much funding you have available.
Yeah, just to build a
The next project is the Prickly Pear Land Trust. This is for some trail maintenance, kind of along the 10-mile park trail and part of a CDT project with the US Forest Service. Generally just doing some of that, rehabbing some trails. Comments, generally good project. So we originally were not gonna fund this project based on available funding. Then we went back and forth and I said, well, could we try to fund them? So that's why I have 32,000 right here, but it's also in red and we're also $17,000 in the hole right now. I have to pull that from somewhere. There was some discussion or trying to figure out like, is there ways we could pull funding? Should we pull funding to try and fund some of these projects? I was working on this up till this morning because it's just so hard to make these decisions. Right now, I'm honestly not sure if we'll have the funding or ability to fund this. Currently, like maybe we could put about roughly $15,000 towards it, but considering the original expense, I don't know if that would really go very far. So it might be that this one ends up being a no fund and then redistributing that leftover dollars back into some of these upper scored projects. But I'll open it up to discussion here today.
I can't say anything.
Oh, okay.
I don't think I can
I'm a
either.
member.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
I
No.
thought it sounded like a good project. I like that it had year-round rec access, so winter, summer, spring, fall. So I thought it was great. So if there is available funding, I would be sure. But I don't envy your hard
No.
shell game of figuring out if there is funding for it.
We generally, like in our discussion internally, we're like, we like this project.
Mhm.
Can we fund it? Question mark.
Mhm. Yeah.
In order to get this to this 32, which I think would be like a solid partial funding situation, we would have to just pull some dollars, about 50,000 out of some of these upper projects. Of course, no one wants to do that either. So it's all
Was the,
tricky.
sorry,
You're good.
this is a 12-mile project in total. Was the other 6 what was funded last year?
Oh,
How'd they fund the first 6?
so
Any idea?
I don't know what funding they used. They were originally awarded last year for, I believe, a portion of this project. However, after like the staff meeting and we were going through the award process, they actually withdrew their application. So we ended up not funding that because they withdrew on their own terms. And that has something to do with the Forest Service. I was supposed to get a letter or something from the Forest Service describing, and I never really did. I'm sure they just got busy, but they didn't want them to go through with the RTP application at that time.
Yeah, it says 12 miles total, but 6 miles in this proposed project.
Yeah, so I was wondering what happened to the other 6.
Yeah.
That's
They
my,
could've
that
just
was my
found
comment
other
on the whole
funds.
thing.
This is my stickiest application.
So just jumping around, the only other number you got there is the Silvercrest Trails.
Yeah, I'll kind of run
Let's-
through
let's-
these.
Let's talk about
Yeah.
that one, then we know what our, maybe what our full pool is.
Yeah. So just quickly going through some of these other ones too. 9 Mile Ranger District was the next one. I don't even remember what this one, I think this one was generally for maintenance. Here we go. Yep, maintenance on the West Fork Fish Trail. We put down no funding because it was just, we were limited at this point. National Forest Foundation, this was for maintenance in the Selway Bitterroot. Based on scoring and available funding, we've decided to do a no fund on this one. Also considering that I think we fully funded or almost fully funded the Selway Bitterroot folks. And they're a really close partner with the National Forest Foundation. They were kind of working, it looks like hand in hand quite a bit. So we went with a no fund, although with a heavy encouragement to apply again in the future because they're an organization we haven't really funded in the past. So it'd be cool to see from them again. Just running through these. Silvercrest Trails Association, this is a really small operation. Application wasn't the best, it kind of fell a little flat. But the conversation was just about showing support for some of these smaller operations, rural. And if we couldn't find some small amount of money just to show support. So that's where that $5,000 comes from. We could just pull that. That's just something the internal committee felt strong about. Then we have, well, I guess I'll pause there. Any thoughts or comments on that?
That's a great one.
You mean the project or the application?
The project.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say the
Yeah,
application.
the
felt
application
really
is
just
definitely
flat.
for flat.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
No, you're
totally
right.
fair.
Good one.
They are getting 4,800 if I remember right, through TSP right now.
Oh, what is that for?
Silvercrest.
Is that for all like grooming and stuff?
It's for grooming, different grooming than yours. So
Well, that's a consideration.
Yeah.
What is this one for specifically?
Grooming.
Grooming.
And summer trail maintenance.
Okay, what would people think about, because again, I'm 17 in the hole. If they are getting funding from TSP, would we consider a no fund on this one based on that?
so right now they're at 4,800
TSP.
for TSP.
Are we,
I mean, if they're proposing, 5,000 and we don't, if they're getting TSP money, it would be,
pretty minimal?
yeah,
Yeah.
but it would help you get to what your number needs to be.
Yep.
I'd be okay with that.
Yeah.
All right, so without any opposition. Zeroed out that application. Just to get us a little closer.
And I guess Prickly Pear Land Trust as well, being funded through TSP at 14.
Yeah, for a totally different project though, correct?
Yes, totally different project. That's the East Elmo one.
Yeah, yeah.
We will briefly talk about that again when we talk about TSP.
Okay, well, great discussion. And so we're moving forward with a no fund of Silvercrest Trails, knowing that they're gonna be funded through TSP. Next, we have the Bitterroot Backcountry Cyclist. This one, this application seemed to have quite a bit going on with it. construction of 2.7 miles of single track, punch-in bridges. I'm probably saying that wrong. Comments from our internal committee said could be a good project, but generally lost points due to lack of details in 1B, 1C, 0 points for 3B. There was just some questions that they just kind of missed and it really lost points. It was one of those that they'd love to see another application from again in the future. We see value, but the points just weren't there. Okay. Next one, Gardner Ranger District. This one was also a signage project, just a sign, not just a, it was a specific signage project on some of their trail systems. Generally speaking, we felt very supportive of that type of project, kind of similar to the Billings signage project. We see a lot of value in it. The application just fell flat. And it can't be just because it's signage, because we had one signage project that was at the very top, and this is one just kind of fell at the bottom. So it was another one like come back again. Sounds like a great opportunity, just not enough this time. And then lastly, Beartooth Ranger District. This was for salaries for their trail crews. But their application honestly just kind of fell flat and missed a lot of points in a lot of different areas. It was kind of, I think we talked a little bit about it yesterday. It was sort of the same application to RTP. So we just couldn't find the argument to get those numbers up. So we have that in a note fund. So knowing that, I think the only major question I have for the staff, as I've gone back and forth on these numbers many times, it could use some outside input, is do we want to try and move some funding around from these upper projects to help partially fund the prickly pear? Or knowing that they are getting funding through TSP, do we zero out this project to meet our needs, and then I can just fill in some of these other projects with the leftover dollars taken from prickly pear?
So is the 32,000, does that all add up to balance your budget, or are you still?
I'm about 12,000
Oh, you're
over.
12,000.
So like in theory, I could fund them 19, about 20. And that would zero it out. I guess my thought on that is just, is that enough to make the project worth it?
And yet if you take some off of the others, then you end up with the same situation. You have a whole
Yeah.
bunch of
Yeah.
people getting a little bit.
Right.
The other idea is
Hard to
to,
hard to pull it away.
yeah. So the other idea would be to zero out the prickly pear and then use those dollars to more fully fund some of these upper projects. Unless we think the prickly pear would accept that 20,000, they could still get a good amount of work done with that. I just know it's quite a bit lower. They requested 75. So it's a big decrease.
And that was a natural surface trail, right?
This is tough, keep my mouth shut.
Does anyone remember that was natural surface, right? It wasn't
Yeah.
like asphalt, so they would have less for like those mow costs that we were worried about cutting some of those like
No,
asphalt.
I think the
concrete
main one was
ones,
like
so-
MCC trails, which are contracted services, I think. I think that's what it kind of was. So I think that 32 would have been for like 2 hitches or something like that.
Yeah,
Does someone have the-
64,000 on contracted services, and so you'd end up, you'd be really limited on your contracted services for sure.
Yeah. I just don't know how much of a pinch point that will be.
A week of MCC work costs $8,000, and 80-week project, that amounts to 64,000. Is what their budget narrative states.
Another thought is if we wanted to pull $10,000 from some of these upper funded projects to get prickly pear closer to 30, which is what they said for their partial funding level. I think it was like 30, 32 would be like helpful to them.
Okay, so they did specify.
Yeah, they
that. Okay.
specified, I think they specified like 32,000 or something.
Well, it says, although partial funding not ideal, it would still benefit the project. Should we secure partial funding? For land trust to allocate those funds to cover a significant portion of the MCC expenses, which is 64,000. And seek additional funding for any outstanding. So they really didn't make a mention of 30.
Maybe I made that up. Maybe I imposed that on them.
I'm not trying to, yeah, I'm not trying to put you on the spot.
I don't know why 32 is like so strong in my mind.
But and seek additional funding sources for any outstanding crew time and oversight costs, which would be 11,000. So this one's to cover a significant. Should we secure partial funding, Prickly Pear Land Trust would allocate those funds to cover a significant portion of the 64,000 of MCC expenses. So it seems like they would need.
Portion.
Huh?
The key word to me there is significant.
Yeah, what would be a
Portion of
definition of a
64.
significant portion of 64? Yeah. And that's for two hitches maybe, or, you know, that's for, well, the 64,000 is described as weeks. How did they do that? A week costs $8,000 and it's an 8-week project. So whatever.
So it's like
Yeah.
2 week, two.
I'm figuring out how many weeks that you wanted to fund. If you did 24,000, would that fund 3 weeks? And then you'd have your materials.
Would, if we funded it at 24,000, that wouldn't be too much to try and find from these other projects. Then maybe that would give them something to start with.
Are you still 17 over?
No, right now with this red 19,900, I am at a perfect zeroed out. So if we went to like 24, you know, found like $5,000 from some of these other projects to put towards Prickly Pear. I don't know if that sounds like a reasonable, like here's like some seed money to get going.
Yeah, it's just that by the time they do the administration and everything, is that?
That too.
I don't know the answer to that. I haven't been.
Whether
Yeah,
it's a phone at all, I don't know if they're gonna.
I think about that too, because I don't want it to just become like a burden.
Bob's over there just biting his tongue.
Yeah, he's just
I
like,
know.
I'm looking at it. I'm biting my tongue for multiple reasons. You know, yeah, I'm a member of the Prickly Pear and very close to them. I'd love to see us fund part of the project. But at the same time, you're taking away from projects that scored higher. Please don't let Mary know that I said this, although, I mean, you know, she'll probably find out, but I don't know if that's the right thing to do. Especially the discussion here about if they could accomplish anything with 20,000 or 24,000.
That's my biggest concern.
I'd love to see them get it, but given the discussion here, I'll just leave it at that.
And I guess for whatever it's worth, I'd say it seems like they've gotten pretty decent funding from both programs in past years. And if we're on the fence this year and there's a different organization that can use the funding, maybe it should go to a different organization.
Well, I appreciate this conversation. It's super helpful. Again, internal committee really liked the project, and I think we wished it scored a little higher so we could reason it a little better, but it's so hard when you have some really good, we had some very good applications come through, so it's just like up the ante as far as competition that much more. It sounds like from the discussion, we might go no fund on this application and then redistribute that 19,000 back into some of these upper projects just to make some of these other ones more whole.
Isn't that 19,000 in the red though? Don't you need that to make it to your zero balance by no funding?
No, when this was 32, I was in the negative.
Okay.
And then we like said, well, here's the max we actually could get out, and that would zero out the balance. So if I put this at 0, now I have 19,000.
Okay.
And I would just redistribute, and that's something I can just go top to bottom and like fill in the blanks a little bit.
I think that would be a good thing.
Yeah, that's a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I really appreciate that conversation. It's definitely something like I thought I had it figured out, and then I was like, well, I don't know. I was going back and forth a lot up until this morning on that, so.
Well, let me ask, I'm asking a question, not making a suggestion. So I'm backing off a little bit.
Now I'm scared.
You got $19,000 balance.
Yeah,
Could you ask a certain individual on a project we just talked about? If that could work,
what do you guys think?
rather than redistribute it to a bunch of others? It's just a question, not a suggestion.
No, I was gonna suggest that. Why not ask them if they can mobilize and use that amount of money at all on the ground, or if it's more of a pain in their butt?
I see a question in your eyes, Stephanie. What do you think?
I want to do
Is that
what
not
would make the
PC?
stack.
I mean, can you do that
Yeah,
within the scope of the rules and say, hey, here's, you want our
I don't think
leftovers?
anything prevents me from doing that. I would want to make sure that that seems like a healthy approach from you guys. As long as it seems like a
Yeah, do we set a precedent?
fair approach, that's, yeah, is it
Call
fair?
everybody that got partial funding and say, do you want partial funding? Or do you?
Yeah.
I don't, that's the only thing that, you know, because there's others that are getting partial and should we have to call them or whatever, but anyway.
And it very well
agree
could
with that.
be,
That's well said.
I mean, they said they would have said partial funding, their section on that was fairly broad, and maybe it is something where like, we got 20, we'll find 10, we'll have 32, we'll do half this year. Some of these groups are pretty creative when it comes to, I mean, just having a nonprofit background, you get creative when you need to, you dig deep. I'm totally happy to partially fund them at 20,000, even though it's small. And they can always just say no. Or I could say, here you go, and if they say no, they say no.
I'll step out of the room.
I don't know if there's I just don't know if there's a right way to do it. There's no right answer, so.
There's no right answer.
So anyway, but. You
I
know,
mean, that
then-
seems like the most straightforward way is to say, this is what we have available, you know, and it's,
It's in their court.
yeah, I mean, and it's based on their score and how they did and how we wanted to fund it with what we had left over. And if they don't want it, then it stays in the pot for next year, right?
If they reject it, I think I would try and more fully fund some of the.
Okay,
other
you could go
projects.
back and do that. It still leaves you that option.
I would prefer,
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's actually a nice benefit.
yeah, otherwise, yes, I think it would go back into the pot for next year.
I suppose it applies to every project. I mean, you can go clear up to the, any of those partially funded ones, and if the Sealy Lake Nordic Club says, sorry, we can't use this money because we gotta have our full boat, it could happen anywhere,
It could happen.
Mhm.
on any project, really.
Well, I think the vibe
have to make a
is
decision.
to go with offering a partial fund at 20,000, and then it's in their court, if that is enough for them to accept or not accept. Is that? Yeah. Any other comments, thoughts, burning questions? Generally block you.
Yeah. Well, then I'll say thank you.
Okay, that is RTP. So pat yourselves on the back. We got that through that pretty painlessly, I think. With that, I think we can take another quick 5-minute break, and then I know Hunter wanted to pop back in with some leftover TSP discussions from yesterday. So let's do that. Let's break.
You want us to turn these into you?
Yes, that would be super fantastic. For those online, we'll be back at 10:17, about a 10-minute break.
No, I just.
All right, we're back online, continuing our meeting here today with some leftover TSP discussion, so I'm gonna just hand it on over to Hunter.
Okay, let's talk TSP. First, I think we should just jump in. Somebody told me yesterday, I think it was, you told me that you scored 1-8.
Me? Yeah.
Instead of 0 by accident.
Yeah.
So I went back and looked at that and found that, and that did make a slight change in the
Okay.
scoring for City of Helena. I don't think it changes the rest of the mix too much, but City of Helena would have moved up to 40th. It was at 45th. And the only real difference that may or may not make, I don't think we want to make any change there, but it would put it right next to Prickly Pear Land Trust, which would have been 41st. So think about that for a second, and if we feel we need to make a change there, we certainly can. If we want to leave it as is, I don't think it's necessarily a problem.
So the city of Helena was no funding though, right?
Correct. And Prickly Pear Land Trust
Prickly
was full
Pear
funding.
was full. And then we also kind of reallocated the Scotchman money, didn't we? A little bit yesterday.
So we did,
We decided not to fund it.
the way my spreadsheet is right now, we're at 1,929,000. And if we want, we can just move right into the next conversation. I picked out the lowest scoring applications that currently have full or partial funding. I think we can get a little bit more to reallocate to some other stuff too.
Hunter, is it at all possible to put what you had up yesterday up and share screen, or is that not possible today?
I wish I could. Stephanie was making me think that with her spreadsheet she had up, that would be a good idea. I can share the screen I have right now.
If not, I can just try to go find it.
Okay,
No,
it was
no worries.
emailed out. Yeah, it's definitely something for me to keep in mind for next year, to make a spreadsheet to share on the screen. Well, want to just think about that as we talk about, have the rest of our conversation, and then we can jump back to it. I don't know that we need to make a decision now.
Which Helena, Prickly Pear?
Yeah, Helena and Prickly Pear.
Well, I have a suggestion there, and again, I'll talk about Helena project. The Helena project was existing trail, some relocation switchbacks. Construction of 12 and 35 feet of new trail prism. Good project. The other one is a new park, and that's the one that we talked about yesterday. That's a trail that's connecting 3 communities.
Yep.
It's the portion between, well, over by East Helena. So I'll just leave it at that.
And that was the creek access.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I can still, that City of Helena trail, I can still use it. It was just, this would improve it.
Well, actually, this section they're talking about is south of East Helena, and it goes by the old smelter site.
Yeah.
And
He's
and
talking
so-
the city of
the city of
Helena.
Helena.
Oh, you're talking City of Helena, I'm sorry.
City of Helena.
Sorry, yeah.
I can use that.
Yeah.
That's just recutting a set of switchbacks on
Yeah.
it is the project.
It's, improving the switchbacks. So
Do what you want. I say go with the Prickly Pear and forget Helena.
And it did
It's just
seem like
many-
that prickly pear one had a lot of positive comments
Yeah.
from both the staff and
Yeah.
non-general committee based on just the impact of the project on East Elma.
I don't think we should mess with prickly pear,
Okay, we'll leave that the
my
way,
opinion.
I agree.
okay, we'll leave that the way it is then and jump into the rest of our conversation here. So I'm really glad we did this. Definitely good feedback yesterday to kind of go back and pull some of those lower scoring ones out and reconsider them. So I don't know what the easiest way to do this is, but I'll just read them off and then we can go back and maybe look at each one. But the bottom of that list, so the lowest scoring application that is currently being fully funded is Friends of the Little Belts, and that one's $100,000 project, ranked 57th over in scoring.
Was it motorized or non-motorized?
That was a True Elements of Both project.
Can I ask a question?
You bet.
What are we trying to find funding for?
Good question.
That might give us a clue as to how much we might be looking for something.
Yep, so I'm on two spreadsheets here, but we had kind of two conversations going on moving funding around. I think one was Gateway to Glacier Trail, which had no funding. And the note I have on that one is first in line to partial fund if we came up with the funding. I think we're definitely going to for that. And then the other conversation was the three kind of mountain bike type trail projects, Flathead area mountain bikers, Mountain Bike Missoula, and the Dirt Concern. Right now, two of them are partially funded, and Mountain Bike Missoula isn't funded at all. And it did seem like there was a little bit of discrepancy on that one in the scoring as well.
The matter is, all three of those mountain bike trail projects are in the top 20, right?
Yep.
Yeah,
And they're 10, 15, and 18, so they're all right there.
Yeah.
and the city of Billings was 22 and not funded at all either. Different type of project.
That seemed pretty clear cut to me at 57th that maybe we should reconsider funding Friends of the Little Belts.
What did we do on RTP this morning with that group?
They were partially funded. They requested 100. I think we gave them 45.
45, was that it? Okay,
Yeah, that was primarily that was for me.
okay.
So the notes said that that was motorized, but Friends of the Little Belt, but you're saying it was elements of each.
Yeah.
It
It's
was
diverse.
diversified for
Yeah.
RTP.
Well, but TSP.
TSP, it was elements of both motorized and non-motorized trail maintenance, kind of a broad overarching project in the Little Belts.
What was I got Dirt Concern and MB Missoula. What was the third?
Flathead.
Flathead.
Yesterday on Mountain Bike Missoula, we had talked about in their app, $16,000 for the base area loop. We chatted about, now they're recommended for none. But we had talked about that, 16,000 is what they had in their application that would do the base area loop.
Yes.
So we did
Which is
chat
their
about that.
priority. Yeah.
Yeah,
And we didn't fund the Friends of the Scotchman Peak, but was that money reallocated for the Gateway to Glacier Trail then, Hunter?
Not yet, but we can that'll be done in this conversation.
Okay.
So right now,
So we do have that.
So we're talking about potentially just partially funding Friends of the Little Belts because they scored so low in their application, like 57th out of 61, correct? Just to make
Partial-
sure
yeah.
I'm following along, right?
That's the correct scoring, and I'll leave it up to the group, but partially or not at all, just based on their scoring. If we were to do a partial, I'd say it should have a non-motorized focus, given the other motorized projects in the Little Belts.
I think that's a good call, yeah.
But I also think it would be pretty fair just to say, come back in a future year with another application and not fund it.
Well, I would go either way. I would go with whatever you recommend. It's
Well,
so competitive in this round with so many good quality applications. I would love to reward people that really put the effort into writing a good application. So
What are our needs? Maybe
as
is
well
where
as
we should start.
surveys.
We need
Yeah.
16,000 minimum for MTV Missoula. We
Right.
talked about giving some money, they scored mid-level to Gateway to Glacier Trail. Consider partial funding for that project. Right now it's at 0. Now, I don't have my computer in front of me, but is there a partial we could do with Gateway to Glacier?
I can pull it up right now. I won't tell you that.
I got a really weird suggestion.
Brooke,
You know,
Here's a never-
I don't sleep at night even after 3 glasses of wine. So we've got 7 $100,000 rewards, right?
DR8 construction.
What if we took 5,000 each from those? Because what's 95,000 versus 100? Can they afford to lose the 5? I don't know. Well, that'd give you 35,000. And then you take all the odd dollars. You know, your $14,980 and $33,200 and $19,728. You add up all those odd dollars, told you I don't sleep. That comes to $5,621. Just I'm throwing it out there because my mind works in weird ways, okay? And shut me down if you don't like it. I'm just telling you where my brain goes. That to me gives us basically $40,000. And then we can give MTB Missoula the whole thing, potentially, that which puts them even with the other mountain bike awards. And we've still got the Friends of Scotchman Peak, so money that we've pulled out, which is 21,000, and give that to Gateway to Glacier.
I like where you're coming from on that. I guess maybe let's go there next. I think we should look at Friends of the Little Belts and a few of these others and really have the conversation of whether we want to provide any funding or no funding for some of those. Just Friends of the Little Belts anyway jumped out at me, given the kind of the scrutiny we were giving some of those other $100,000 projects. It seems like it's scoring awful low to be fully funded, and it's scoring very low to be low to be fully funded, and it would still be our lowest scoring partially funded project as well.
And they got 45 from RTP.
I mean, my thought is just if something scores so low, I don't know why we would fund it at all if we haven't funded things that scored much higher. Just as a matter of principle, I don't know what would make their application get funded at that score.
Especially when 92,000 of it is salaries and labor.
Yeah, and that is for their trail cutting volunteers, but
Okay, it's crew, gotcha.
yeah. I think it's another one where it's a good project. It'd be great if we could fund it. Given the higher scoring applications that we have that currently have no funding, or are partial funded. I'd say if we are to partial fund them, it should be pretty low. Like I'd say just to throw out a number for conversation, maybe 20,000, and you're kind of earmark it for non-motorized trail maintenance as much as they can do. I think it would be very fair, and I really want to leave it up to the room, but very fair just not to fund that one.
Just looking at the application again, just to compare it on the notes and everything to see why it was so low funded, or why it ranked so low. But
And I guess I hate to do this too much, but for Gateway to Glacier, say that would fully fund that project. Potentially. Or we could give it $80,000 of funding. Or just split it evenly between that one and the mountain bike projects.
Well, one thing that on the Gateway to Glacier, they were in partnership with the mountain bikers. We talked about that yesterday also, that they were listed on Gateway to Glacier. When you look at their partners on that, the mountain bike, Flathead Area Mountain Bikers are on there as a partner in that one. So that is used in that. Not if it makes a difference.
Well, Hunter made a recommendation. Friends of the Little Belts. Want to give them anything, or you want to give them 20,000?
I say give them
Let's
20
get
for
to it.
non-motorized.
I'm good with that.
Yeah, give them some.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm gonna second that, or
Okay with
A, whatever, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine with that. I guess my vote would be nothing for just how they scored and not
too.
funding other stuff, but just
Me too.
not necessarily this specific project, but just in general for dispersing money.
I'm with you on that, but I will go with what staff recommends.
Yes.
For this.
Okay, so am I hearing 20,000
We got a couple for
I
20,000.
think we had more saying
for the Little
that.
Belts?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, let's do it.
an official vote.
And I
We're gonna
know.
Well, we're just an advisory council, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
ultimately, it's up to you guys, as
That is
staff,
very
right?
true.
I am very much seeking advice.
You know what, in the past, the staff has really taken our recommendations to heart, though. And luckily, every year, there's some flexibility left to the staff at the end to make some of those tough final decisions, but they've always really taken our advice to heart, so. Okay, so we made up 80,000 there.
So with that done, we have about 140,000 that can go towards other projects right now.
You said 140?
Mm-hmm.
I think you automatically take the 40 and give it to MTB Missoula, just because that's equal footing with the other two projects that we've got, and they all fall high.
And then go to the Gateway to
So we-
Glacier with the other.
I mean, just a place to start.
So go to 40,000 for MTB.
And they already have 16 with my current math, so giving them another 34.
$16 or $18?
You said 16,000 for the base area loop. I'd already put that in.
I think it's 18.
Was it? Okay.
I don't know,
16.
double check it.
I think it
can
was,
wheel-
I think it was around 17. And then what was our plan with Gateway to Glacier then?
Our numbers, right?
Well, we haven't got there yet.
Oh, sorry. I'm jumping ahead.
We're at 110, 115,000. So, and we can still talk about some of the other bottom applications too.
Oh, we had to back into that.
The farther we go up this list, I think maybe the harder it'll be to take funding away from some of these projects, but the next on the list, so the second lowest scoring application that we're funding would be US Forest Service Beaverhead Deer Lodge. This is the Trail Ranger one. So another true elements of both project.
There was two Beaverhead, Deer Lodge, one Dillon and one Panther.
This is Dillon.
Okay, fine.
28,000. And I had both Beaverhead Deer Lodge projects, I had a revisit note on.
Yeah.
The other was the Pintler Ranger District with the trail connection between Phillipsburg and Discovery Echo Lake.
And the
The
Dillon one
Dillon
was for
one
two.
did. Yeah. The Dillon one wasn't as much request, but it did score quite a bit lower than the Deer Lodge Pintler.
Yes.
And the Dillon one was elements of both, or it seemed like there was some motorized in that too.
So the Dillon one, or go ahead.
No, I just, go ahead and tell us what it was.
I was gonna say the Dillon one, kind of the idea I came up with that one is if we wanted to go to partial, I hate to leave a guy out there by himself, but they had 2 summer trail ranger type positions, could do just one. And that would be half the funding.
One wasn't for winter, huh? I thought there was a winter and a summer now.
Wasn't remembering that, but I could be mixed up.
I go for half.
It's only 28,000, which buy us a lot, but definitely something.
It get
Wouldn't
us
we have enough-
14.
Yeah, get us 14.
Would we have enough to do Gateway though, with the changes that we've made?
Yes.
So,
And I guess the other part of this conversation too is, right now I have a note from the Pintler Ranger District one saying to fund one or several, but not all, of the MCC hitches.
right.
Yeah, it was 3 hitches versus 2.
We can't go to that right now though, if we want to go back to Gateway to Glacier.
Yeah, I think we should.
Before we move on, I have a quick question about the elements of both. Do we have like we had kind of like a motorized pot, you know, the percentage and the elements of both. Do we need to be weighing those differently if it had elements of both? So even if they had a lower score, because there weren't very many of them, right? Or,
There were, no,
Okay.
there were really only 4 that were truly motorized, non-motorized. I think there's a lot of the motorized projects would benefit somehow non-motorized recreation, and even some of the non-motorized probably have a indirect benefit to a lot of motorized recreation through just reducing conflict and things like that. What do you think, Bob, just for context on the origin of that?
Oh, the 30, 30, 40?
Yeah, that middle 40.
Initially, it was, we call it just like RTP, diversified use. It meant more than one use. That's all. Could be hiking and bicycling.
oh,
Or it
okay.
could be riding a dirt bike in the summertime and skiing in the wintertime. That was the definition that came from RTP, just more than one use. That's how it started. Then I think the department kind of started using a different term, I believe.
Well, the elements of both.
That was a primary TSP change of language, and I think the intent was to be like motorized and non-motorized, I think. Or there was just some like floaty language in there
Yeah.
to separate it from RTP's
Yeah.
structure.
But the intent of the bill when it was done was to follow RTP.
Yeah.
So you can say whatever you want, but when we did the bill, it was to be structured after RTP.
Right.
So.
Which meant more than one use.
Yep.
And have that as its own pool of money.
Well, it's.
The harder part is that pretty much every non-motorized project, almost everyone could be considered diversified because they have more than one use.
Yeah.
So that's where it's like, well, let's start with like, okay, there's actually non-motorized, not motorized. Then we have our non-motorized, and then we could always move a lot of those non-motorized projects over to diversified to fill the bucket if we need
Okay,
to.
so we don't have to, if they scored lower, prioritize them over like Gateway to Glacier or something like that, like a, okay.
Well, as long as we meet the, you know, the critical point is that you meet the 30% motorized.
Okay, and we've done that.
And that's
Okay.
always been the challenge. But now it's getting better. Obviously, this year it got better. That's the most important point right there.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. I just wanted to make sure we were weighing these.
And
appropriately.
the language that's being used by the sponsor, I believe, and a lot of the folks talking about that in the hearing, were saying either or. So in the hearing on the new bill, instead of saying elements of both, they've been saying motorized, non-motorized, or either or.
Okay, so kind of like a slush fund in between.
Kind of, yeah.
Okay, interesting.
And that's right or wrong, that was kind of the way I was looking at it for most of this. Seems to be the way it's been looked at in the past.
Okay.
So do we have $100,000 to give to Gateway to Glacier?
We do.
I think so. I'd be in favor of doing it.
I am too. That's why I'm bringing it up.
Okay.
Get right to it, Rick.
Yeah.
She wants out of here.
I'm in.
Happy date tonight. Just gotta get ready. So what's left over if we do that? Have we spent everything if we do that shift?
Close.
Yeah, we have $10,000 to $15,000. But we can continue this conversation a little bit if you want to, looking at lower scoring applications. So we talked about the Dillon Ranger District.
Yeah, I was gonna say, what did we do with those now that you're?
We haven't done anything yet.
Okay.
But we have Beaverhead Deer, the two Beaverhead Deer Lodge projects, the Dillon Ranger District and the Pintler Ranger District.
Where do you have Pintler at? Do you have it at the full or at the 33.2?
So Pintler is a partial with a note about the MCC hitches. And I don't have a dollar amount in that line yet at all.
Because their ask
So
for their partial was 33.2 to fund 2 out of 3 hitches.
Which we could do that and take one.
And their full was 62.8.
We could do that and take one trail ranger away from the Dillon Ranger District. The math would pretty much add up on that.
So you're saying do half for Dillon and half for Pintler?
Yep, so Dillon would get 14 and Pintler would get 33.2. And that puts us about right where we are, just at 2,008,000 and change, which I can work out the dollars and cents on it if we need to do that.
And so we don't need to move that money then? That would just kind of even things out or level it out.
So I just moved it on my spreadsheet here. The only real change we made was half funding the Dillon Ranger District and putting that towards Beaverhead Deer Lodge.
Okay.
And that makes your bottom line come out pretty close.
Yeah. Yep.
And that gives 40,000 to Mountain Bike Missoula, just like the other two mountain bike groups.
It'd actually be more, it'd be the 40 plus the 18.
Mountain Bike Missoula.
Yeah.
I just evened it to 40. So
Oh,
there's
you did, okay.
40 for Mountain Bike Missoula, Dirt Concern, and Flathead
Gotcha.
Area Mountain Bikers.
Okay. I'm good with it.
Okay. And I don't know if we want to keep going here, but I would just call out that Bitterroot Backcountry Cyclists, which was also, if I'm remembering right, they were a fairly high dollar project. I'm on two different spreadsheets here, so I don't have the dollar amount in front of me, but they ranked 48th. and we're getting funding still. And then the Montana Trail 406 Association and Silver Crest Trails were right down there in the 40s as well. And getting full or partial funding.
Then you have to ask the questions, if we lowered their funding, where was the need that we want to, where was the higher scoring one that did not get funded that we would want to move those to, and then so that we could have that conversation.
The City of Billings was ranked 22nd and got nothing.
Helena was at 40 and didn't get anything.
City of Billings, I think, didn't want a partial.
Oh, is that what it was?
No, they would accept a partial, I think.
On the 100,000 that was paving, I think, for wasn't. I think
Mhm.
it was paving or a partial. We kind of talked about that.
Yeah.
So let me pull it up and take a look here.
The Bitterroot Backcountry Cyclist was $100,000 project. We were proposing to give them just a little under 30 for the first 2 years of their planned 4-year project. Silver Crest Trails, I don't think we want to do anything there. They were $4,800 for cross-country ski trail grooming. We talked about them briefly with RTP, pretty low dollar project.
So Billings did say they would take partial. This is the exact location with prior tours, depending on the funding and what they got through RTP. We will start where the RTP funding ends and pave as far east as possible, or we will not receive any RTP and they have to start west side and pave as far east.
So the 406 trail, that one was only $7,000. Yeah. So it wouldn't be.
That was the camping, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that they wouldn't be
In
able to.
Highwood.
I gotta say something there. I kept my mouth shut yesterday. I think it's a bad project. The Trail 40, it's a great idea, the Trail 406, and they've kind of identified routes across the state that it's a dream trail. I don't know what else to call it. In other words, the Forest Service and the trail that's near Highwood, it's not called the 406 trail. I don't even, well, you wouldn't know, Brad, would you? It's a Forest Service trail. And so what they're trying to do, and it's a great idea, is try to connect the eastern side of the state to the western side of the state using existing routes and then trying to make fill-ins along the way. And so, you know, it's a beautiful dream, and I hope it can be accomplished. A campsite in the little town of Highwood, we heard yesterday, it could be a good thing for Highwood. There was questions about what kind of use it might get or might not get. And I guess my other question about it is it's a campsite. And do we fund campsites with the trail money? Again, it's a question, but I just wanted you to know, the group as a whole agreed to fund it yesterday. I just wanted you to know, from me personally, I kept my big mouth shut. I'm not real keen on that project,
But there's people using it, right? Didn't we hear from the gentleman that there's people using it with no place to overnight?
No public land.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's non-motorized in the sense that these people are moving through that area with the need for a place to stay.
Yeah.
But it's not on the trail itself. I mean, it seemed ineligible to me, but.
It's north of town though, wasn't it?
They said it was a half a mile away from the trail.
Oh, it was.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And then there was the Lewis and Clark bike route, which I didn't really remember from the application, but was somewhere in the general area too.
Yeah.
It really comes down to that, like, what's a trail side amenity type of conversation, which we don't have a concrete book with all the lists of what is and isn't a trail side amenity in there, so it's kind of a gray area.
Maybe that's something we can talk about at our fall meeting.
Yeah.
Usually we have a fall meeting where we talk about this kind of thing, you know, should the scoring rubric be changed, or should there be other considerations like this? Is a lot of times topics of the fall meeting. Maybe we need to talk about that then.
Because it does set a precedence for campgrounds, and in Montana, we have hundreds of campgrounds at the trailhead zone or service land, hundreds of backcountry campsites. So are we gonna start funding?
I know
It opens the door, and it's fine either way, but
we do have campsite maintenance. A lot of our backcountry, like wilderness trail groups are doing campsite cleanup and campsite maintenance.
Backcountry horsemen, yeah.
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 So that's one that has been done quite a bit.
Yeah.
Off the top of my head, I can't think of any campsite construction projects that have been done previously.
I think that's the uniqueness though, of the TSP grant, is it offers up
We have quite a bit of flexibility.
opportunity that
Yeah.
otherwise wouldn't be available.
Yeah.
And that was the intent when
Sure.
Trails Coalition, everybody put it together,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So
I
keep
really,
it simple, keep it easy, and be more broad and open.
Yeah, and again, part of the reason I didn't say anything yesterday, even though I can probably saying too much today, is this is a good organization. They're really trying their best, the Trail 406 group, to do something. They got turned down in the legislature last session, trying to get some funding for trail signing along this route. And the legislature shut them down in committee. And they're still working hard. That's why the only reason I didn't say anything yesterday was because I don't want to discourage this organization. So I'll just leave it at that. That's why I kept my mouth shut yesterday.
See, I don't know if it's doable, but if they had like the project where they extended actually a trail to where this campsite is that connected to the thing, then to me, it seems like it's a trail side amenity, but like it's not connected to it right now, so.
I'm sorry, I had to step away. What are we talking about?
it's good you're here. We're talking about the Montana Trail 406 campsite and whether it would be eligible. We're kind of back on that conversation.
Sorry.
No, it's good. It is one of the lower scoring applications. So I don't know if you were here when I read off 3 other low scoring but funded, fully or partially funded applications. But we had Silvercrest Trails was in the 40s. They're getting $4,800. The Montana Trail 406 Association was low 40s, $7,000. And then Bitterroot Backcountry Cyclists was also low 40s and getting just under $40,000 partially funded. But with the Trail 406 Association, we were talking about whether it's a trail side amenity or not, and also concerns about how much the trail is being used.
How many people it's serving? Well, I think
Yes.
one thing you need to realize is that it's a trail side amenity for touring cyclists on the Lewis and Clark bicycle route, which it's not, I guess it's not technically a trail because it's on roads. What we call in the bike travel world a bike camp is what basically we're trying to establish. I think Marty's concern that he expressed yesterday is the distance between amenities for anybody that wants to try to bike or walk the 406 trail, is that it's 40 miles between the Fame Creek campground, which is in the Highwood Mountains, and Fort Benton, which is the next place to actually camp that isn't, it's all privately held ranching land
Sure.
out there.
I think whether we can call it an amenity or not still stands a little bit, but for this type of trail,
Separately, yeah.
seems like it's kind of on the same lines as like the Continental Divide Trail where like people hitchhike into Helena all the time off the CDT. And if this is a mile, if they've just packed over the highwoods and or from Fort Benton going the other direction, with the bar right there, a mile out of the way for a beer is probably worth it to a lot of those folks. Would be pretty feasible that they leave the trail for that short of a distance to get into town.
Yeah, I just,
I'm
from the
either
rural
way.
perspective, I would love to see, you know, the little town benefit. But I feel like I'm kind of like Bob with Helena Trails, Prickly Pear. I mean, I have a vested interest in that, you know, this is the community that I was born and raised in, so it's also serving, you know, two of my passionate areas of activity, which is bike travel and hiking, long hiking. So I will leave it up to the committee, but I think it's a great project.
I vote to leave it alone.
I'll second that.
Okay,
I'm in favor.
okay, leave that one.
Discussion. Let's consider this kind of amenities for our fall meeting.
I have a note.
Good, okay, I just thought.
And the
that-
distance they
let's
can
just-
be off of an established trail to an amenity.
Or what we may even want to fund, you know, for amenities. So,
Yeah, I agree. I think it would be helpful, and I think, you know, it'd be interesting. I know that our September meeting doesn't leave us a lot of time to change the way that how these applications are formatted. But I wonder, Hunter, just based on kind of your first experience through this process, if there isn't, and some of the feedback that you're getting on these comments, there isn't some way we can improve the application process or streamline it, so you know, those annual ones that we see every year for snow grooming and stuff like that. There's any way to kind of separate them out, or
And
I don't know.
I have a note for that right next to my note to talk about trailside amenities. So I do, especially after going through the process, think that would make this meeting easier for sure. And I think with the other changes that may happen with our guidelines, that would be a good time to be making those types of changes in the application and application review.
Yeah, I think the
Makes sense.
universal access and waste management, like, I think either within the application itself to nail those down so that we're not giving 1 or 2 extra points to projects that clearly do not meet the definition of what those are. And that always bums me out, that we're giving them, you know, 1 to 2 extra points where they don't meet that criteria, but because they mark the box, they're getting it.
Yeah. And I'll send an email out at some point after this meeting. But I think those focal areas are another thing that I kind of look to this committee to come up with new focal areas. We've had the waste management and universal access for the last 2 years, so we'll need to make new ones. To talk scoring a little bit too, I feel like there's a lot of these where we've had a little bit of conversation that's been outside the quality of their application and how they had things in the application. So maybe a more kind of opinionated or subjective question for 5 points or something like that on kind of the staff member, the scorer's opinion of the project, or just overall how you're receiving their application positively or negatively, maybe would be helpful in some of these. Might be a lower scoring, otherwise lower scoring project that maybe they just didn't reference plans or didn't have a polished application, but still had a really good project.
I also think, thinking about our regions and service to the state as a whole, you know, I know we really lack applications from north and southeastern Montana. So I wonder, obviously, we've encouraged the staff to do a lot of outreach, but it's just really difficult. But I wonder if there's a way that we give, or there's some kind of scoring that automatically goes to those applications. They get an extra bonus point or something like that, so
You
that.
gotta get the applications first.
Right, we gotta get the application first. Right, that is true. I can hear your muttering. I can hear it.
She worked with you way too long, Bob. She can hear you in the.
Jenny, you're
in
here
their
a
mind.
whole lot better than mine.
You don't need to speak and she can hear you.
Well, I also know how his mind works, so. But yeah, you know, I think we definitely want to serve the entire state, but I do realize that, you know, also Stephanie and Hunter's time is very limited for how much outreach they can do, so it's a catch-22 for sure.
And I do think the scoring is definitely a good starting point, but there's a lot of this that regardless of what we do, it'll come down to the discretion of this group and the conversations we have here. So, and we have the flexibility to make those changes and do that.
I do appreciate this process very much, even though I couldn't attend in person with y'all today and yesterday. It's very much appreciated that we get the opportunity to weigh in together as a group.
The last thing on TSP funding, I think we should talk about, and then we can be done with that conversation. Would be Bitterroot Backcountry Cyclist was scored 48, so lower scoring, $100,000 ask for a 4-year project. We're providing them $40,000, just under $40,000 for the first 2 years of that project. And I believe in their first year, they had grant funding from a totally different source that was going to cover half of that first year. And then TSP would cover the second half of their first year and their second year in this case. With that being low scoring, is everybody comfortable with that partial fund, or would we want to move that money to one of the other kind of mountain bike centric projects or somewhere else altogether? Billings Trail Nuts, one I've heard, or Billings, City of Billings is one I've heard brought up.
City of Billings did score a lot higher.
Yeah, I really like that project, but isn't the City of Billings? It's a repavement, so we can't really. It would be hard to do a partial. For
What did the City of Billings do on the RTP side this morning?
They were repave and we fully funded.
Yeah, so it's 100,000 on that.
Yeah.
So whatever that we did here on this would probably be done in conjunction with that.
I
So,
think that would be the intent.
so there would be,
Yeah.
so it would be their mold and all that would be covered, and any funding that we did would probably be beneficial to the city that way. And they did put in their thing, they would request, or they would accept a partial and do what they could with it, depending on their RTP funding.
Oh, that's a good
So-
point. That's great. I would love to
So
see
if it was,
that.
so if it was the difference between 100,000 and 130,000 could be a substantial amount of trail that would be paved. So, or, you know, or however it worked out, so.
I like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thinking.
So pull that and put it towards City of Billings. And if there's, so that we're right where we need to be as far as how much we have allocated out. If a project were to get canceled, or I'll take a look through and just review to make sure if one that were partial funding that we've changed the numbers on, if they had a partial funding recommendation, just slightly higher or slightly lower, I might try and meet what they put in for their partial funding recommendation. But there's never extra money, but if there is any extra money, should we just put it into City of Billings?
Yeah,
Or the mountain
I
support
support
biking
that.
ones.
Yeah, that makes sense. You scored so low. Very good.
Okay. Any
That's-
final thoughts on funding or anything we didn't talk about today that somebody wanted to talk about as far as TSP funding?
What, Hunter, just a quick question on timeline. So the staff will go back in and kind of make sure you've captured everything. And then will you let us know, or will we just wait until you send out the final awards and you'll send us an email with that information that it's going out?
So usually what's happened in the past, and I don't know if Hunter and Beth have changed anything for TSP, but we go back in, like for RTP, go back to my internal committee, here's our final comments and stuff from the stack. Okay, we agree with these. Then it goes to public comment and it's posted for public comment, and that's where you guys, if you had any other final thoughts, that would be your next opportunity to see the project and make any final public comment on it.
What's the window on that? So like how long is the public?
I think public comment's open for 15 days once we post it, and I'll try and get it up in the next 2 weeks.
I said early to mid-April, I think.
Yeah.
For the decision.
That's the MEPA, satisfy MEPA, is that what
Yeah.
we're talking about? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And where do you go to look at that public comment? Are we gonna get an email or something that it's posted, or are we going to?
If you're signed up with FWP stuff, you'll get a notice, like a public notice. Otherwise, I think we usually send out just a
Being a
heads
member
up.
of STAC, does that make us signed up on the FWP stuff that you're talking about?
No idea.
Oh.
But like I said, I think in the past, we've also sent a heads up, like, by the way, these are up now. So we can do that again.
And where to
We
look at
post
them,
it.
yeah, that'd be good.
Yeah, and then after that, then we start going into like contracting and stuff. So
Can you send us a copy of the spreadsheet that we settled on today?
For
Yeah.
RTP.
I need to do some cleanup on my end.
And well, for both.
Yeah.
Please.
I could give you my notes, but do some cleanup on my end, make sure all the numbers are right, and then before we send out the proposed decision for public comment, I can just send it out to this group and give what's enough, like a week or 5 days, just to look through it, and if I made any mistakes, it'll be hard to have a discussion again with all of us. But if there's a red flag or something, you could say, hey, what about this? And I can do my best to try and figure it out.
That's great, thank you.
Yeah.
Cool.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right, so congratulations. So we got through like 100 applications. Good job. Thank you.
Congratulations to you guys for
Yeah.
the coordinating of and suggestions,
Yeah.
because that obviously makes it go so much smoother.
Absolutely.
This was a great conversation here today. And then I guess final notes is our next meeting, our next staff meeting, as discussed, it's usually like a summer fall meeting to talk about guidelines for the upcoming cycle, any changes that need to be made, et cetera, et cetera. Do we have any like hard nose on weeks or whatnot in September or sorry, August or September? Do you want us to just send out like a poll on some miscellaneous dates? Do we have any strong feelings about timelines? In person or
It'll be the second
Zoom?
half of September for me, just because I try and do a motorcycle BDR route or something in September every year. Usually it's the early part of September, but it's a week-long deal.
I have our annual history conference. It's usually the third week of September. So
September.
we could avoid that.
Just a thought. There's gonna be the Montana Outdoor Recreation Summit in October. Could we do it in coordination with that?
I just feel it's gonna be too late because we
Oh.
usually open November 1.
Oh, yeah, okay, okay.
So we need to make sure we have enough time to
Yeah.
rally and any change, I'm sure. Otherwise, yes, that would have been a really cool idea.
I think you should send out a poll.
Send a poll.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Okay. We'll gather that up and send it out
Not coming
maybe
from
May,
city.
the end of next month or something. Leila?
Hi, so while it's too late to do it in October, is there any way that the stack could have some kind of meeting or gathering during that time, just to have everybody know who you are and, you know, interact with the committee? It's a thought. And then the other thought, since I have the floor, this is my first time coming into being an advisor, and I've been very quiet, trying to just listen, but very impressed with how you guys have run all of this, all the decisions and everything. So kudos to you guys.
Thank you. Okay, anything else for the betterment of trails?
Do you guys want me to scan this and send it to you, or do you care?
So I think I have what I need on my end. If you think I would benefit from having it or want me to have it, I'm happy to take it. And I guess I'd say too, if there's anything that somebody didn't want to say in this room, you can send me an email. I'm pretty sturdy. I can take negative comments.
Usually comes out at the end, doesn't it, Bob?
I think we're good though. I don't think there is, I don't think I need any notes to make changes on my, my spreadsheet, so.
Alrighty.
All I'd ask is I might have to get a little help on this this voucher, just something of what the best recommended way to do that, I guess, or whatever on some of it.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Hand it over to me,
We'll
scan
just-
it, send it to me, email me the electronic copy. For the sake of organization, maybe send your travel vouchers to me and I'll collect them and get them to where they need to go. Otherwise, if we're sending them to both of us, we might miss them, so.
Did you bring copies of that?
I brought some very small printed copies. You didn't like one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'll have to try
All
it.
right, thank you everyone online for joining. That closes our meeting today. Have a great one and we will follow up here soon.
And was that the correct version?
Good job.
Stephanie?
Thank you. Great.
It's because it's,
So Hunter,
it seemed like it had an older
Okay,
mileage rate
good.
on it.
hey Hunter.
Oh, it did?
I'm not the sharpest
It's
knife.
currently
in the drawer, okay?
70 cents a
And
mile,
I'm
and it
kind
looked
of,
like it
I'm
had
over here with my
If
friend.
it does,
Can you talk to us
even
a
if
minute
it does,
about
I
this
can correct that on
expense
my end.
report?
Okay.
Or
Tell me what we're
Kelly will
gonna do.
definitely correct it, so
Okay.
either way.
Your travel stuff.
Yeah, travel deal. I mean, what lines, this line, that line?
Never even looked at it. Maybe Stephanie can.
Yeah, I think that